fly away 体中に広がるパノラマ
Welcome to Fandom Post Radio. I'm Kestrel, and we have a very special episode celebrating all that is Dragon Ball. Joining me is Cain.
You're not Kate.
I'm not Kate. Kate doesn't always introduce us.
This feels weird.
Kate hates Dragon Ball. No, she doesn't hate Dragon Ball, but she doesn't love it enough to be on this episode. So
I also like how you started this episode like it's going to be an after-school special.
I know.
On a very special episode.
So that's Cain. We have Brandon for the first time in a while.
I know. Just got out of the hyperbolic time chamber, that's all.
I see. That's the room of what, Spirit and Time? Is that the correct terminology?
You got it. There you go.
Nailed it.
Yeah, and you heard another voice there. So if you've listened to any of our previous episodes, anytime someone asks a question about Dragon Ball, you'll probably hear me say something like, let me check Kanzenshuu. So I'm very excited that for this episode, we're also joined by the founders of that all-encompassing Dragon Ball fan site and its predecessors. So we have Mike Labrie.
Hey, great to be here. You may see me around the internet as Vegito EX, but yes, Mike, please.
And we also have Heath Cutler.
Howdy. How's everybody doing? Yeah, I typically go by Hujio online, but I am very comfortable with Heath.
All right. Yeah, I just listened to Mike interview a NASA rocket scientist on your podcast, so
Yeah,
I'm sure our crew will be right on par with that.
My credentials
Right
are
up his
somewhere
alley.
near that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, one of the questions you wanted, and I suggested was if the Raven mob was murdered in space, or what may have happened when the moon blew up the first time. So I think we were pretty close to the same experience.
I guess that's probably the most important question, so we can just start with that. Were they
Is
murdered?
Roshi a serial murderer?
Yeah.
No, so there's actually a question. That was one of the things that got addressed later. Toriyama said they're just floating off through space. And then there was a bonus illustration. I don't remember what volume it was, but Toyotaro addressed that in a kind of like interstitial chapter illustration where you're nodding along. Were they back making mochi? Was the moon was back? What was the deal there? I think they're back.
Yeah, they had restored the moon.
Yeah. So, hey, look, we're already off to a good start answering all your questions.
Wow.
Here you
My
go,
life's
Cain.
now complete.
Yeah, these are the ideal people for your insane questions. Yeah, so in case anyone is wondering why we're focusing on Dragon Ball right now, we are coming right up on the 40th anniversary, probably going to publish this episode right around that date. And as we alluded to, there is a brand new anime series called Dragon Ball Daima that just started last month. And of course, as we discussed in great length at the time, the creator of this franchise, Akira Toriyama, passed away earlier this year. So I'd been wanting to do a Dragon Ball episode for a long time and to bring on some representatives from Kanzenshuu for it. So this felt like the most appropriate time to do so. So thanks everyone for joining.
Yeah, great to be here. So you got the majority of the crew. The other of our current trio, Julian, he lives in Japan, so this is just not good recording timing for him.
Oh yeah, I would bet.
He is
He's
not a
probably,
late night person.
Yeah, so I know some of you have probably answered this many, many times, but we always have to start episodes like this by asking for each of us, what is your history with Dragon Ball? And I like to do it in the order of when each of us were introduced to the franchise. So I'm guessing that I know the two who are going to be talking first. But if everyone just wants to put in the year that they got into Dragon Ball in the Discord chat, we can go in chronological order there. Your best approximation, if you don't remember exactly.
It's a great question.
96. All right, that's got to be first, right?
Yeah.
What year were you born, Bran?
94. So
Okay, we were all alive. We were all alive.
We were all technically alive. Yeah.
Cool.
Congratulations on your 30th.
Thank you.
It's all downhill from there, by the way.
He's not wrong.
Cool. So the rest of us are pretty much around the same area. Yeah. So for the two of you, feel free in discussing your history with the franchise to also include, your contributions to the fandom community that eventually became the Kanzenshuu that we're talking about now. For anyone who doesn't know what Kanzenshuu is, feel free to kind of illustrate that. So I guess, Mike, you can go first.
Oh boy, those are a series of questions that are all their own.
But I figured they're all kind of intertwined, right?
Yeah. I like to preface the answer by saying this was not my introduction, but it was something I retroactively went back to. And I was obviously big into video games in the early mid-90s, collecting video game magazines. EGM was my jam. So I would always skip through the spiky hair characters I didn't recognize and just move on to Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter and NBA Jam, stuff I was playing. Then I was a freshman in high school in September 1996. And a friend of mine said, "Hey, I just saw this amazing cartoon this weekend. You should check out the next episode the next weekend," because he just saw the first episode. So I came in. I know exactly when I came in. I came in with episode 2 of Funimation's syndication broadcast of Dragon Ball Z in September 1996. And from that moment, I just kind of never left. I just continued onward. I threw myself into the franchise. I wanted to know everything about it. I got my first online computer in 1997. So then in January 1998, I launched Vegito EX's Ultimate DBZ links page on my 2 megs of AOL space. The way I saw it was there are all these other Dragon Ball fan sites. I already had everything covered. There's nothing for me to do other than just point to the best of the best. In 1998, Google wasn't what you know of it now. We were manually submitting our links to stuff like Yahoo that was themselves manually adding links in categories. There weren't search engines as we know it. So I just said, hey, I'm going to point to the best of the best. I continued from there. Within a month, I had changed it to Vegito EX's homepage. I was throwing up like sound recordings I had. I was starting to pick up books and things. I just wanted to share everything that I was learning about and acquiring. That transitioned itself into, I'm a big fan of rebranding. So transitioned to Daizenshuu EX in 2000. And I ran Daiz EX from 2000 to 2012. At which point I performed a little fusion dance or earrings. Not entirely sure what it is. I guess it was the earrings. All right. So then depending on the continuity. Yeah. Okay. But yeah, that was my fandom introduction and starting a website, and we'll talk, I'm sure, a lot more about the stuff that happened in the years in between there, but that's the long and short of it. So Heath, over to you, man.
So my introduction was in early 1997, so just shortly after Mike, and it was very similar as far as I got my first family computer in 1997, 56K modem, which we were lucky if we got 28. So I had a friend in middle school or junior high that approached me and said, have you seen the show? And at that point, I think it had just hit reruns. So they had run through everything they had. And I started on the very first episode, right when Raditz shows up for Dragon Ball Z. And that's where it started for me. I did the same thing. I ran to my computer, tried to find as much information on it as I possibly could. And at that point, there wasn't a lot. And everything that you found was just duplicates all over the place. And that tended to be the case for a very long time. So by the time I got into college, I had really dabbled in website design and coding, and it just kind of became a hobby, even though I was going to school to be a civil engineer. And so my career path and my hobby paths are like polar opposite, which is kind of always interesting. But I really enjoy what I do on both sides of it. And that's kind of where everything kind of became married, because at that time in the early 2000s, I got my first job and had expendable income. And over in Japan was a revival happening around 2002 to 2004. We were getting the Kanzenban copies of, or Kanzenban version of the manga. We were getting Dragon boxes. And so I just started purchasing everything. And that is when I decided, hey, I have the opportunity to own all of this, and I would like to share it with people because they were very expensive, and importing then is not what it is now. I mean, the Dragon boxes were like, I think about $1,000 a piece. I mean, you can see a couple of them behind me, and at the time I was like, I'm going to do it. Why not? And that's when I decided to take all that information that I had acquired, put it in a website form, and then eventually, I believe it was 2005, I launched Kanzenshuu, and the rest is kind of history. Mike and I became friends. We talked a lot, and then eventually, in the backseat of his wife's car, we decided, hey, let's just merge because we pretty much do the same thing, but we have very accompanying content, and we could really put that together. And that's kind of where we are today, and we're still just rolling strong. So
Nice.
we both have a passion for it, and that's what's really enjoyable.
I will mention my career is front-end web development, and
There you go.
I've always appreciated the design of a Kanzenshuu and its predecessors. So, yeah, keep
Very
up the
nice.
good work.
Thank you.
All right, Cain, you want to go next?
Yeah, before that, I wanted to say I love the idea of the mythical levels that people had to go to for importing anime back in the day. So when I hear anyone talk about it, my brain immediately just rushes to people taking crowbars to boxes of cigars, and then there's a dragon box under all the cigars, and that was really what was shipped over. Or like classic mafioso style when it comes to importing some of this stuff. Very much like fell off the back of a truck style stuff, because it was
a phrase
just
we use all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is going to be visual just for the folks on the call, but the thing I'm holding up, this is a monthly Shonen Jump with a chapter of Nekomajin in it. This was an era, was it 2003, 2004, when this was wrapping up. You couldn't just buy manga issues on Amazon Japan. I don't even remember what site it was that I would have purchased this volume on, but we were like digging around, like, okay, this is coming to a close. We got to get these issues. And someone found some site that did a proxy purchase from some other site that would send it to you. And that wasn't a really big thing back then. And so, like, I always remember and feel so strongly about the stuff that I got, even in the early aughts, because it felt so hard. And today, Amazon, I always joke, Amazon Japan just sends it like a personalized fucking rocket ship to my house, where I got the Japanese guidebook for Sparking Zero before I got the American copy of the game. And that's just wild to me. Anyway, I'm sorry. I got stories for everything.
Yeah, no
love it.
worries. That's some of the more fun things to talk about generally anyway, is the
Absolutely.
experience of folks back in the day versus the plethora, for better or for worse, of the options that we have to choose from now.
How good we
but
have it
That's
now.
not even to contrast the differences between fan subbing back then.
Yeah, I was going to say the
Physical
odds,
media
never
compared to
mind.
digital media.
Mid-90s, the VHS fan sub, sure. Yeah, how
Oh, yeah,
old man and crotchety do you want to get here? So we can do that.
I know.
That was because that was what you needed 2 VHSs, one like hard locked and something like that. Like I can't remember the exact details. I used to know, but it's been so long.
It was typically in a Amiga computer. Is it a Genlock was the device that folks used to
Genlock,
overlay
that's
the text over top? Yeah. Never got into actual fan subbing myself, but certainly have boxes upon boxes still out in the garage because I don't have the heart to get rid of them.
The halcyon days, I understand that for sure. I still have a bootleg set of Evangelion that I don't want to get rid of because it represents a distinct point of my life that I that's the only bit that I like revisiting. But to get back on to the topic at hand. So my history with Dragon Ball itself is rather fragmented. So the 2001-ish bit that I included in there is, I guess you could say, when I was first exposed to Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, and that was through like the television programs that we have around here, like your Tsunamis and all that. But I can't say I ever sat down and watched it in series at all. Like my brother and I would watch it anytime it was on, but we never seemed to catch it in a way that was actually, timeline dependent. And we always seemed to catch the episodes that were mainly just them like screaming on Planet Namek. So of course it caused our family to dunk on us mercilessly every time they would come downstairs and see that was on the television. So we weren't very good at watching it in that standpoint, but especially when we got our first internet-based computer in the house that was ours, not a family computer. This was probably closer to like 2005, is when you could go to you could sail the high seas, so to speak, and watch whatever you wanted, and that was our true first experience with Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z that actually made sense in any way, shape, or form. And then, of course, it quickly went into playing like Tenkaichi Budokai and games like that. And him and I have, been experiencing the anime and manga and everything ever since. Probably our longest running piece of Dragon Ball material that we both really delve into and talk about is the gacha game. As funny as that sounds, the Dokkan Battle gacha game. Him and I have been playing that together since the first day it launched in 2015, and he has like 9 years of logins. He's logged in every single day, if only just to do it. So our experience is kind of not unconventional, but it definitely not the standard you hear of people who like watch it every day and stuff. It probably wasn't until we were older and had the capability to get it ourselves where we really started delving into the product. And then most recently, I read the Dragon Ball manga, at least up to when Z starts, and then have been watching Daima and watched Super, and I haven't played Sparking Zero yet though. That's something I still need to do.
I thought you were posting stuff about Sparking Zero, Cain. Am I misremembering that?
Yeah, because I was watching playthroughs and talking to my friends who own it, but I actually haven't purchased it and played it. So the things that I had seen, like the fun fan servicey bits and stuff like that, those are all mainly from my friends sending me things as they own the game. But I'm so entrenched in like Street Fighter and shit that I'm afraid to pick up another fighting game.
Gotcha.
Fair.
Yeah, it looks like Bran and I are both 2002. You want to go first?
Yeah. Mine is pretty similar line to Cain, just, getting fragments of childhood memories from Toonami reruns, a lot of that going back to like Namek, Saiyan Saga stuff, and that was my first exposure for sure, but my first actual learning of the story itself was through Budokai 1 and 2, playing through the games and getting like that version of the story, and just like being so mad when you like win a fight, but your character still has to lose in the cutscene, stuff like that. But yeah, I'd say overall though, besides a lot of my early years catching it on Cartoon Network and Toonami, I've been a pretty casual fan over the years. I caught some of the movies here and there as they've come out. I did read through, similar to you, Cain, I read through the original Dragon Ball probably around like 2016, 17 or so. And then, I don't really keep up with Super or anything. So outside of like also watching like the fighting game scene with like DBZ Fighters and Sparking Zero and stuff, I don't really keep up with it aside from Daima just starting, which I was like, well, if there's any time to get back into it, it's now.
Yeah. Yeah, so for me, 2002, I don't know if it was exactly when I first saw anything about Dragon Ball. I might have seen it mentioned in some magazines before that, but it's definitely when I really got into the franchise. And yeah, I do know that I had seen it grouped with like Pokemon and Digimon in magazines and stuff like that, which I was already into for a few years. I turned 10 in 2002. So that was right around that time that I was just kind of really getting into all those franchises. And I didn't really think that there was, this big anime scene. I didn't know what anime was. But my friends got me into Dragon Ball Z. I got my hands on some of the Pioneer 3-episode VHSs of the early Z episodes, with the Rock the Dragon theme song, of course. So I watched those on repeat constantly, and I wasn't aware at the time that it had ever been, syndicated on broadcast, because I didn't have cable myself. But around this time, it was also when my dad had moved out, and then he had cable, so when I would go over there, I would be able to watch Cartoon Network, and that allowed me to watch, other parts of both the original Dragon Ball anime and Dragon Ball Z. And then near the end of 2002, I was exposed to it in a couple other mediums. So Budokai, like people have mentioned, was definitely a big thing then. So I got that as soon as it came out and played through it. And then also Viz's new Shonen Jump magazine was, launched in January 2003 technically. So really it started at the end of 2002 as well. And that, like Keith mentioned, was kind of a comeback time in Japan for the franchise as well. Not only the video games, but the Kanzenban and everything else. And so that was a big time kind of worldwide. And Shonen Jump was my first exposure to manga, period. So I was kind of just getting it from all sides, getting obsessed with it in all these different mediums. I would watch the tapes, run to the TV to watch on Toonami, play through the story mode of Budokai, play against my friends, collect every issue of Shonen Jump. And that was, of course, I was drawn to it because it had Dragon Ball on the cover, Dragon Ball Z as it was labeled. And, other magazines and stuff that informed me that there was this thing called anime that all of the stuff I was into was a part of, and there was a lot more, and it was all from Japan. So because of that, not only is Dragon Ball obviously my gateway to manga, since I, read everything else in Shonen Jump, and that kickstarted that whole obsession, but I consider it my gateway to anime, even though it was technically my third anime, just because it was what taught me what anime was and that I could seek out more. And Toonami kind of became my equivalent of Shonen Jump for anime, in that I started watching it because of Dragon Ball and DBZ, and then I just started watching other stuff around it, and that has, put me down the path that I'm at today. And unlike those other early franchises that I eventually dropped off over the years, I'm still watching new Dragon Ball anime every week, 22 and a half years later, and I don't have any desire to grow out of it. So much of the other anime and manga that I still love are the Shonen Action series that have been following Dragon Ball's blueprints ever since. And that's certainly no coincidence, given how formative that series was to my passion for each of these mediums. So even if I'm not specifically writing and podcasting about Dragon Ball all the time, I'm definitely only doing the writing and podcasting that I do because of Dragon Ball, ultimately. And, for the rest of these questions, A, you can answer in any order. So just answer when you have something on your mind. B, don't feel like you all have to answer everything. And C, if you have any other fun stories, anecdotes, questions, feel free. Don't worry about any structure here. I'm on Pacific time, so I got all night. It's for the best interest of the rest of you that we don't take 7 hours. As we've talked about, Dragon Ball has been this massive phenomenon for now coming up on 4 decades. It's set this formula that most of the hit shonen action manga have largely followed in that time, and it continues to produce new content despite the original story lasting barely over a decade. As we've mentioned, there's a new TV series, there's a new video game, both just got released or started last month. So what do you think it is about Dragon Ball specifically that has made it so ubiquitous, so influential, so enduring over the years?
I'll go first, because I'd actually thought about this question a decent amount before we got started. So I figured I'd throw my hat in the ring here first, because this is the question that'll make me sound the least ignorant.
Yeah.
So I tried to think of a very well-articulated opinion and, educated and researched, but at the end of the day, I actually just boiled it down to the fact that it's simple yet effective and perfect in its execution of what Dragon Ball, and Dragon Ball Z in particular, wants to do. Like, the main characters are charming. You always know essentially they are the bad guys, and their goal is to defeat the universe threatening. I mean, they're the good guys and they want to defeat the universe threatening bad guys. And then what you get over that course of time is basically a series of training montages with hype music or moments, and then battles and fights that accentuate the determination and spirit of a warrior and someone who never wants to give up despite however many obstacles and adversities come in their way. And that just speaks to a lot of people, especially, the younger folks, that you can do anything if you try hard enough. And that's something that I think still resonates and always will resonate. Goku is kind and funny, but when push comes to shove, he'll, slap Frieza so hard that it makes a meme that still is used 30 years later anytime someone gets dunked on the internet. It's just like I don't know. It's so quintessentially like perfect in its execution most of the time without having too many frills. Like, there's lore if you want it, but you don't need it. There's lots of character interactions and everything, but you really don't need those either. So it's perfect for people who just want to turn on a show and watch the good guys sock the shit out of the bad guys. And it's also great for people who want to have like a lore of a world and all these characters and forms and how they interact and the different pieces of media kind of contributing to all of it. So it really kind of gives a little bit of everything for everyone. Which, I mean, that's certainly why my brother and I still like it, because he's way more into it and way into the lore. And I just kind of like watching people beat the shit out of, stupid dickhead aliens. So that's kind of perfect.
The word you use there is simple. I think you're going to hear a couple of phrases from me. Simple and in spite of. In spite of its simplicity, Toriyama almost inadvertently throws so much of himself and his worldview into the series, and it comes through in ways that you wouldn't expect, and ways that you don't even acknowledge kind of your first couple of read-throughs. There's just something about these characters, like, all right, this is Goku. He's a bumpkin who loves to fight. And as you said, like, yes, he will do the right thing, but it's also because he's a Dumbo that he just wants to go fight the strong guy. Like, you can identify with and understand that, like, on such a base level. You don't need any more explanation. But there's all this other stuff kind of like under the surface, the way that Toriyama writes these characters. And the way that he's able to write such a compelling group of characters. I know a lot of people take issue with this, but I think what I love about Toriyama's writing style is that he holds nothing holy or sacred about his own creations. He'll joke about, I had to erase that out of my memory so I could fit something new in so I could roll with it. But I actually appreciate how he will just drop a character and he'll write the character out of the series. Lunch went off chasing Tenshinhan. Okay, she's gone. That's it.
Yeah.
That's all there is to it. There's nothing more to it, but it's effective and it opens up space for other characters. What's the thing I think about it? Kestrel, you'll probably think about this from website design. Heath, you know this too. Like, the average person can only keep like 5 to 7 choices in their head at any given time. So Toriyama will like get rid of this character to bring this character in to keep the core group down to this small amount. And he so effortlessly does that, and probably without thinking about it that way. I think those are some of the things that allows the series to endure and just brings in more and more people over the years and the decades.
So Lunch is tech debt, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
I think along this line of simplicity and the way I think it kind of, captures just the basic hero's journey. It takes like this lifelong narrative of stories we've had throughout time, and it's just like one of the more modern versions of this like never-ending story that people just love to enjoy in one way or another. And history has the Odyssey and all that, and today we have Star Wars and Dragon Ball. It's just kind of like a thing that everyone can attach to one way or another, whether it's just a character or a moment or a fight scene. Even just like any one little thing could be everything to somebody. And lots of people talk about you look at a character silhouette and like being able to just see Goku's silhouette. 90% of people will like know exactly who that is when they see it, and it's just something that has stood the test of time better than a lot of other media we have nowadays. And that it breaks barriers from anyone around the world to see that silhouette or to hear. Someone just needs to squat down, do like a key charge and yell a little bit, and they know exactly what you're doing. So it's just something over the years that everybody has it just becomes such a cultural phenomenon that it's stuck so hard to so many people.
Sorry, Bran, that silhouette was actually Tullus.
Yeah. No. Or was Bardock, perhaps?
I thought it was Bardock.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
Just for Mike.
That's a good point, Bran, that I want to just comment on real quick. Like, Goku and Pikachu, like, anybody will tell you who those two people are. They got floats in the Macy's Day Parade, several iterations, all sorts of stuff. Like, Goku is Goku and will always be Goku no matter who you are. So, yeah, it's just a cross-cultural icon.
Yeah, I don't want to pull the Beatles curse and say Goku's bigger than Jesus, but I mean nowadays, who knows?
And Al Roker is a big Kanzenshuu fan because he knows how to pronounce Cyan.
You got it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, not to segue too much, but I think it's really interesting I think Mike and I, having really followed the series as long as we have, that we both remember the point where, everything that we have today up until 2000, I mean, the standing notion at that point was the series was over.
It's done. It's over. That's it.
Much ended. And we had all moved on. We were still following the series and we had plenty of stuff we were working on. But I remember when they announced the Kanzenban and the Dragon Boxes, and it was just like, what is happening? Because Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball GT, all the movies outside of Japan, within Japan, were never available on DVD until that point. Everything was on VHS tapes. The TV series, all 3 TV series, were never available for home consumption, ever. You had to record them. They were on TV. They were still being rebroadcast all the time. They were in rerun for infinity. So the fact when Dragon Ball Kai was we flipped shit. I remember Mike calling me and was like, what is happening right now? We need to get on a podcast. Let's get there in an hour. I'm getting everybody else together. And we lost it. And here we are now today, 2024, and we've just had the 5th episode of Dragon Ball Daima. And it's just really, really surreal because we never thought we would actually be at this point. And it's very intriguing. I'm going to go totally old man right here. But how many people, when Dragon Ball Z Kai started airing, that we had popping up all over the place, have never heard of Dragon Ball ever, and how much that expanded the fan base to all these children. We had people hopping online that, between the ages of 8 and 14, and we're just like, okay, what is happening? And it's become a mirror image, kind of how it was in Japan. A lot of the people that are working on the series now grew up watching it as children, and it's become multi-generational. And we are now at that point in North America and many other countries around the world, especially, South America, Europe, where we now have, my son owns Dragon Ball shirts, and not because I bought them for him. He has friends that wear them. It's fascinating to just really see where things have evolved from, because I could not have pictured when I was in high school that, there are only like 5 of us that really like Dragon Ball. And now you can walk into any elementary school and every single kid knows who Goku is. It's just so weird. But I love it because that's how you keep a franchise like this going. You make it multi-generational. You keep that passion, that love for a series. And even if it does kind of slow down again, I think it stood the test of time that it'll just keep going.
Yeah, I know we got a lot to cover, but it reminded me of something with the multiple generations and new fans coming in, and what there was at the time. What got me thinking was when you said, it ended, it was over. when I was getting into it, I had all my friends were into American comics. I couldn't wrap my head around all, my wife is huge into X-Men, so I understand this now. Like, you have Uncanny, you have X-Factor, you have like all these different runs that all contribute to this one ongoing story, technically, even they weave in and out of each other. That was too much for me. And so what really grabbed me about anime and manga was there's a beginning and there's an end. And that's the story. You got the story. And then you like it. Well, maybe the author did another series, or there's a series that was influenced by it. So that kind of ties into something I think you'll ask later is where do we want to see the future of the series go? And it's been interesting to watch my own series do the things that repelled me from other franchises back in the day.
Well, and if you think about it, even in Japan back in those days, you did not have long-running series. Most series were, based on a serialization of a comic in a magazine, and those usually ended. At the time, Dragon Ball was like one of the longest-running series that Weekly Shonen Jump had had. When One Piece came along and has just absolutely obliterated like everything that's ever existed as far as length, that was not common. And so it's kind of this weird, as Mike said, when you're used to American comic style of everything coming in and out, and this might end, but it just ends in maybe that storyline, but the continuity of the series keeps going in other comics. That was not the case in Japan. So when Dragon Ball ended, I mean, it was pretty definitive. Toriyama came out and said, I'm done. Like, I'm moving on.
And even with a sequel series, it's like, okay, and that's that thing, and it's that, and it's done, and that's it. And yeah, there were the movies, but it was kind of, all right, that's too much to go into here. I want to hear your other questions.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's interesting you bring that up because I'm also very much on that page where I never got into American comics for that same reason. It just seemed too overwhelming. Where do I start? There's just too much. How do I balance it all?
Yeah, there's 8 issue ones. What are you talking about?
Exactly. So, yeah, definitely, it probably would have been more intimidating to me. Yeah. Yeah, they all cross over. Yeah, it definitely would have been more intimidating if I came into Dragon Ball like it is now, I think. But at least there is a core story to start with, and then if you're interested, you can explore outward. And yeah, I guess I have kind of experienced that too with like the Marvel movies, where initially it was like, oh yeah, you just watch the MCU movies in order, and they cross over, and it's pretty straightforward. It's all self-contained. And now it's like, if you want to watch anything Marvel, you have to have seen every other adaptation of any Marvel thing anyone has ever made.
You haven't seen all 20 Disney Plus shows?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, all the Disney Plus shows, the Sony movies, the Fox movies. It's like, oh, this is not what I came to this for.
Yeah.
Yeah, so segueing into another question that has a lot of overlap with the two we've already covered, but if there's anything else about what it is about Dragon Ball that's impacted each of you specifically, personally, especially for those of you who have dedicated so much of your lives to it.
It brought me Heath. That's how it impacted me.
Aww.
Oh, and my wife. I guess that's mine too, right?
Well, I mean, that's the route I was going to kind of go. It's a combination of things. Yes, we love the franchise. We probably go way more in depth than we ever needed to, but we enjoy it, and that's what we're good at. We're both very historical, archivy, completeness type people, so we drive each other. But we've had so many friends that we've made along the way, people that we never would have met before.
One Piece was the friends you made along the way. You heard it here.
That's right. I mean, just the outreach of people that we get on our Discord and just interaction online, forums. It's really fun to meet a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds, but we all have the same passion. And we're all, I say technically good at what we do with it. But the friendships, I think for us at this point, I'd say more so at the beginning it was different, but really now it is just we've built lifelong friends and we work well together and we have fun together and we do other things outside of Dragon Ball even at this point. And that's, I think, really nice.
Do you think it was just the time in your life and this franchise had so much to offer? Do you think if something else had come along, or do you think there's something specific about Dragon Ball that was kind of like woven into your DNA? This is going to be my thing that I dedicate myself to.
That's almost two different questions, right? Because for me, it came at that critical age, whatever age you are as a freshman in high school, middle school going into high school, that stuff imprints on you, man. Like that's your thing forever. And so it was Dragon Ball for me. And shortly before that, I already mentioned like Street Fighter, big into Street Fighter, still into Street Fighter. Man, Terry, holy cow, man, that crossover. Yeah. Whew. But Dragon Ball just came at the right time. And then what is it? Is there something special about Dragon Ball? I think there is, because Heath and I have said this for literal decades at this point, but there always comes a time where like, okay, that's it. Dragon Ball's over. We've made all the friends we're going to make. That was wonderful. Okay, I'm going to focus on this other stuff now. And then something will come around again. And somehow we make an entire new group of lifelong friends out of it. And you just never see that coming. And it keeps happening. And I couldn't be more thankful for that.
Yeah. I think that power of bringing people together is something that Dragon Ball specifically brings to a lot of people that engage with it. And I told this story on our Toriyama podcast, but it's a memory that I've held for most of my life, because I haven't really had experiences like it where Dragon Ball literally crossing cultural and language borders, like introduced me to people. There was a time in grade school, I grew up in an area that was very, I had a very dense Hispanic population. So we had my classroom in third grade, and then there was the English as a second language other classroom on the other side of the hall. And so the only time we ever really interacted with those kids was at recess. And, we could barely understand each other if we were to speak to each other. But I made friends with 2 or 3 kids on the playground because we would literally meet up and draw Goku and Vegeta and hand them to each other. And we would just look at them when we got back to the classroom. And nothing has ever done that for me before, where we acknowledge each other on a level that we both love this thing and we didn't even have to say a single word to each other.
Heath or Cain, do you have anything to add about, just what it is about Dragon Ball that really touched you personally, or anything else?
I mean, I know for me, I've talked about many times, it did come at that right time, where technology, the internet, and then Dragon Ball are so intertwined for me. I've never been able to really separate them. My passion for one thing and the other, I mean, they married, and it's never really left. And there are so many aspects about Dragon Ball that I thoroughly enjoy, and there's so many aspects about the other. And then as far as web design and marrying the two is match made in heaven for me. It really makes me happy to do a lot of that, because I like to do the deep dives and making the pages, and then being able to take what we put together and share it with everybody as a powerful resource for people to have legitimate discussions and really thrive and envelop their fandom and what they want. So in a way, I've always looked at it as we're kind of that entity that's out there just helping everybody along. If you want to deep dive into the franchise, you can. If you don't want to, but you just want to know who is in a specific episode, or a voice actor that you really like, or an animator that you really like, we have that. You may not care about all of our deep and in-depth guides, but it's there. And we try to cater it so that everybody can use it, and anybody in any country. And I think that's kind of, at that point, what really drove me, because my purpose at the time when I launched Kanzenshuu was to share information that other people just didn't have access to, and I had access to it, and I knew people that could help me, because even then and still now, I don't know everything. I have questions, and then I'm learning as I go and sharing with others. And so it's just this constant cycle for us I think of sharing everything, being open about it. I mean, if anybody has questions, we're usually always more than willing to hop on a podcast or get on a call with somebody, reply to their email, what have you, and just shoot the shit about Dragon Ball if you have a question. And I think that's what's kept me around, but that's also where I came from at the beginning. I love Goku as a character. I love the series as a character. I've grown really attached to a lot of stuff that Toriyama did because his writing style really appealed to me at that age level. It was simplistic yet not. And then the more you would dive into how he came about developing things, I think was really insightful for me as a writer because I do a lot of technical writing. And he would do, I have no clue where this story is going. He would write, I mean, chapter by chapter. He honestly didn't even know how a story arc was going to end. He just would start it because that really intrigued him. And I think that was, just really fascinating to find some of that stuff out. And the more that we've gone through the years and gone through old magazines and things that we didn't even know existed, but was only in Japan in the late 1980s, 90s, that no one had access to because it wasn't being exported anywhere. And being able to share that with people to get more of an insight of the mind of Toriyama and the mind behind Dragon Ball.
Nice. Yeah, so as we were talking about, Dragon Ball started as just this single continuity, this single comic by this single creator. And over these decades, it has traversed many different mediums, storylines, creators, levels of quality, and continuities, so-called levels of canon. And, you can have your Dragon Ball, and maybe some things are not your Dragon Ball. So do any of you have any specific versions or installments of the franchise that you value as, like, this is my Dragon Ball? And are there others that you would rather just kind of forget about?
I mean, the former
Super
is
Dragon Ball Heroes.
God, Keith. So the my Dragon Ball is chapters 1 to 519. It's like just the pure original manga. You can't beat it. Heath, how many episodes behind did we fall on doing the Super Dragon Ball Heroes promotional anime episode guide? Just we'd look at each other, be like, "You gonna write it? You gonna write it? You gonna do the credits for this?"
I think we got up through like 20, and there's like 56.
Yeah. And I don't, especially like you think about, it's only 8 minutes. I'm doing the Daima episode summaries now. It usually takes me, like, I got to break it up and do it over the span of 2 days. Like an 8-minute episode, I could do a summary for that in 10 minutes. That's not a problem at all. They barely even say words during those episodes. But it's just such a slog. It's not even mashing action figures together. It's like action figures sliding across the screen occasionally. And sometimes Goku says Waku Waku. Like it's just really bad. The manga by Yoshitaka Nagayama that ran in Saikyo Jump from, let's see if I can do this off the top of my head. There's Dark Demon Realm, there's Universe Mission, there's Big Bang Mission, Ultra God Mission, and then Meteor Mission. I did it without turning around and looking at him behind me. The manga adaptation of Super Dragon Ball Heroes is better, but even then, it's just, I don't know. There was one chapter in particular that I did a tweet about this, I think at some point, but they're 40 something pages, or there were in its heyday. And there was one chapter that had no words for something like 30 something pages. I actually thought that was incredibly interesting and a wonderful experiment to try. It also made it real easy to read because I didn't have to read any Japanese in that chapter. But so even in the things that are, quote unquote bad and you don't enjoy watching or reading, sometimes there's still just something neat. Occasionally Shida will draw 2 seconds of cool animation in a Super Dragon Ball Heroes episode, and I think Nagayama does a similar thing. But they all have their quirks too. Like we got the shaking effect in the manga, and you got the Yamamuro poses in the anime as well. Like they all have their crutches for it. But all right, Heath, what do you like? Yeah,
I take a big drink before that one.
Healthy swig.
Canonicity is always one of those tricky subjects that we kind of weave our way in and out of not answering.
Yeah.
in a roundabout way. Because it really is one of those things where, to each their own, really. Toei and Shueisha do their darndest to try to justify how certain things fit in the timeline and how they don't.
Or just don't bother.
Yeah. Daizenshuu 6, for every single movie, they try to give a valid explanation of why it may fit within the television series or the manga series, but they straight up on some of them are just like, nah, it doesn't really fit. But this is what would be happening at that time in the series.
Yeah. So that's I gotta chime in because that's one of the frustrating things to me is then you have the people that look at the raw page in Japanese and see, okay, this title is between this title, therefore that means they're saying it happens there. It's like, my dude, you got to read the text that accompanies it, where they say, but it doesn't work.
Yeah. So it's always intriguing to really try to piece that all together, and you have a lot of people that are on one end that are just very. I'll say purist of if it didn't happen in the manga, it's not canon.
And I
if it
like
didn't come
that.
from Toriyama,
I think that's so valid, though.
It is, and that's what I'm saying. There is no legitimate discussion. Well, not discussion, but no legitimate answer
to it. Yeah,
or definitive answer that's just, well, this is what it is. Or if Toriyama said it is, then because the man is notorious for changing everything. So if you just are like, hey, this is what it is now. But Toriyama did it a ton during Super. He's done it in interviews.
Yeah, how do the Potara earrings work?
Changed. Yeah. And do you count a lot of the modern films that he was involved in, but not the seasonal theatrical films that he had no involvement in, except maybe a character design, but story-wise had nothing to do with it? I mean, we now have a character named Pansy in Dragon Ball Daima, and we had a character named Pansy in Dragon Ball Movie 1. So we have all... Toriyama was a very forgetful man many, many times. He would reuse name puns. He would feature characters on spine art multiple times, forgetting he had already drawn them. I mean, so the debate can also be had that just because it came from Toriyama, it doesn't really mean it's canon because he forgot a lot of stuff. Or
because next year they might overwrite it.
Yeah, he was the master. So just the master at, hey, you know what? Somebody would call him out and someone would go, well, I think this is why that happened. And then he's making up on the fly in an interview. And then all of a sudden, boom, that's canon. So
Toriyama and
it's a very interesting discussion. And there have been many takes from many sides by many people for decades. And it's not something that really appeals to me to just, oh, this is what it is. Because I think it's how you enjoy the series, how you like to enjoy the series. Because there are many people that have never read the manga and only watched the TV series and maybe some movies. And then there's the exact opposite of that. And there are people that read all the interviews and own the Daizenshuu and go through those and nitpick them. So it's really, how do you even compare apples to oranges in that case?
I was going to say,
and that's my long answer for all
Toriyama and Hirohiko Araki battling for the I forgot crown.
Yes.
Yeah. Toriyama jokes about forgetting more. So I feel like I need to actually do an entire rumor guide article about breaking down every time that he says he forgot something. Does he actually mean that? And what are the facts behind that? But just going back to the canonicity thing, I've mentioned this a lot lately. I'm very far behind the times. I'm following along with the Just King Things podcast. I'm reading all of Stephen King in publication order. So I'm just wrapping up the final Dark Tower book right now. So for those who know, you'll know all this stuff that we just talked about, the movies, heroes, manga stuff, rewrites of things. It's all just different levels of the tower. That's it. That's all it is.
I'm not familiar with that franchise, but that is always how I've thought about Dragon Ball canon. Is that like, yeah, of course, if you want the simplest answer, then stick with the original manga. You don't need to really worry about anything outside of that. And then from there, you can kind of expand your rings of, your anime TV series, and then, maybe Super and so on. So yeah, that's how I've always kind of described it to people of like, if you want simple, start with the manga. You've got a fairly consistent storyline there, and then you can get more complicated if you want more.
Yeah, I think for the general audience, I think that speculation about things is what like fuels so many of them and their interest.
Yeah, it's fun conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. And to speaking to the opposite end of canon, I feel like a big part of exploring Dragon Ball for the first time as a kid is going on Google in 2006 and being like Super Saiyan 100 and looking up people's fan art of what that looks like. Like, I think that is but like it's important to people creating the mythos of like what this series can mean to you and like what you think it could become, And I feel like it continues to this day. People are probably still speculating like, what's Goku's next form going to look like? And like, oh, what are they going to call it? And it's what drives people. I think that's important.
Yeah, that's all part of the fun is guessing the forms and how powerful one is over the other, or hair colors or positions of people's eyebrows if they even exist anymore in this new form, and things of that nature. That being said, the closest thing I could ever say to what my quote-unquote Dragon Ball is actually stops at the end of the Frieza saga. I always that is when the story hits the peak for me. Not that I haven't watched the rest and enjoy it, but you get the fulfillment of legendary Super Saiyan and the biggest bad guy in the universe at that point getting, just slapped into the face of the earth and all that stuff. And then, the story kind of has such a nice little, tie up in everything at that point. But I also think Super Saiyan 4 is the coolest transformation ever, and GT is generally not considered good by anybody's standards. But man, if Super Saiyan 4 is not the coolest one out of all of them.
Hell yeah.
Outside of Super Saiyan 1, the very first time you see Goku get so mad that he gets the golden hair and all that is so hype. And just maybe it's a connection to a lot of people experience it when they're teenagers and there's just a lot of hormonal anger going on, and then you're watching this guy on screen solve all of his problems by getting so mad and screaming, and then just see nail you are now hammer the problem, which is something that a lot of people wish they could do. So you get sort of wish fulfillment there. But part of me wishes sometimes they would go back and somehow make Super Saiyan 4 quote unquote canon. Like the next form will be just a blue version of that or something. So we get to see Vegeta in those fucking tight ass dungarees.
Those leather pants, man. So
yeah.
Oh my god.
And you get to see everyone in their cool mullets. That is something that if I could have any wish, it would be they would usher that back in as canon, as a true transformation. But I know that, that's probably pretty slim pickings.
I mean, anything's canon if you want it to be canon, and everything that was old is new again, and stuff from GT and all that comes back around. So,
See, to me,
came back.
The Saiyan arc became not canon because I watched that thing 50 times, and I was just so done with it.
But it's the best arc.
It was this doesn't exist. I know, and I love it. And I love Namek and Frieza, and the writing through that is just top notch, and it always has been. But part of it too is we watch it on rerun for 50 years straight, and then every single DVD and Blu-ray and VHS release started with that, and it was fun.
Some of my favorite fan art is always
people. That sarcastically at all.
Some of my favorite fan art is always people speculating on what Nappa would look like as a Super Saiyan. What is it? Just his facial hair, or
I was
what?
gonna say that goes back to the question about it's fun to speculate about this stuff, and that is the question that's, even though Heroes has answered that for us now, that is the question that you still see to this day. What if Nappa had gold hair? I love that. You're totally right. It fuels wonderful conversations.
True. Does Vegeta mustache get a little spiky yellow mustache? I mean,
yeah.
I think something you said, Cain, about Frieza saga being the end all be all for you, because that's just where the story is at its peak. I think that's the other beautiful thing about the series is that everyone can have their own, like, this is where it ends for me, or like, this is where I find the most value out of it. And no one's really wrong when you say that, because like for different people, different parts of the story will hit harder. And I agree that like Frieza Saga is like peak fiction, but for me personally, I liked Gohan so much that Cell Saga was like my peak ending arc, where like he gets his whole send off and the Super Saiyan 2 moment and everything. Just
Yes.
I feel like for everybody, there's like a different area where like for me it might have ended personally, but it's okay that it continues on and people find, some people, I'm sure the most recent like Tournament of Power or whatever is like could be the peak for them, and you know what? Hats off to them. They're also right.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point.
There are a lot of points within Dragon Ball where they're just natural cutoffs.
Right.
And I think that's kind of nice, because if you want to get off the train, you can. If you want to stay on, it'll keep going. And it's also kind of, because how many people in the United States specifically, watch Dragon Ball Z before they watch Dragon Ball? And just how naturally that kind of worked. I mean, you had to pick up a little bit on who the characters were at the beginning, but yeah, it's very doable for a lot of people, and you see it all the time.
Yeah, that's definitely the big advantage of it being so arc-based, that there's no overarching plot, no overarching enemy that we're always building towards. So you can easily just be like, yep, that was a satisfying ending. I'm done now.
It's also that simplicity, too. Like, you never really have to question too hard who the bad guy is.
Yeah.
Like, they just show up and they're like, I'm going to destroy this planet. And then you know exactly who the big bad is. There is not a lot of, political thriller action going on. So, yeah, that certainly helps things as well.
Yeah, so we've been talking a lot about, where the franchise could go from here, where it's headed maybe, the fact that it can keep making new arcs, new stories, keep going forever. Obviously, the landscape of that changed a lot this year with the passing of Toriyama, especially with how involved he's been in the major material for the past decade and change. So with him no longer around, for each of you, would you rather see Dragon Ball end in terms of, full-fledged series, or do you want it to just keep continuing forever with other creators taking on the helm?
Yeah, I don't know. So it kind of gets to my earlier point about my earliest days finding the series and loving that had a very obvious beginning and end. And I've enjoyed things here and there that have come since. There's been some nice expansion to the world. I do kind of just, can we just let it be for a little bit now? I think this is a natural breaking point, and maybe not everyone got a chance to do everything they wanted to do. You think specifically to the Dragon Ball Super manga, where we left after chapter 103, the waving goodbye, which really takes on a different meaning in retrospect there. Everyone's always asking when we get in Black Frieza. I kind of wish Toyotaro would just get his final send off for the series there and then maybe call it a day. We were all really hoping that, is he going to find a way to tie it, just go naturally right into the 28th Budokai at the end of the series, and it truly be like a complete interquel in between? Maybe draw Beerus in the background of a scene or something like that to show that he's been there the whole time. So I think that's kind of, I would like for him to have that opportunity to do it, but if he doesn't, that's kind of okay too. I'm kind of all aboard this Daima send off, and maybe we just need to let it be for a bit. Whether that's out of respect for Toriyama, I don't actually know how to answer that myself, how I feel about it. It seems right. Seems like the right thing to do. But we are a capitalist society, and they're gonna trot out the dead body of Dragon Ball till the ends of time. We just have to accept that. What's going to be after Daima? There's going to be something after Daima. Everyone's always wanted something along the way. Koza Morishita finally got his CG movies, and what's the next thing that they're going to want to do post Daima? There's got to be something. I'll just close it out by saying, put Moro in a video game, you cowards.
I just wanted to ask, when are we getting the George Lucas remasters where the last 4 episodes have beers in the stands?
Yeah. We gotta get that. We gotta get that.
Yeah, like you said, is money is going to always lead the way, and as long as Dragon Ball is still successful as it is, it's going to keep going, and that's the unfortunate case of it. And now even with Daima just starting to air, the very first episode showed snippets of reanimated scenes from Buu Saga, and of course people are automatically going to speculate, oh, are they going to redo all of Dragon Ball Z? Are they going to give it the One Piece treatment and start over with a whole new animation team and just run with it?
The really Dragon Ball.
Yeah, no, exactly. The Dragon Ball. But it's how long can something go on before it gets flanderized into oblivion and Goku just becomes like a big hunk of muscle that does nothing but fight and loses all his character? It's hard to say where that natural end is.
Did you have something, Mike?
Yeah, you know me. The only thing I wanted to chime in there was just to the idea of Toriyama and respect and his decisions. We know what the story was in 2008 when Bandai approached Toei and said, we'd love to get a new series. And Toriyama said no. At that time, it wasn't something he was interested in doing. So they kind of looked around the landscape, and it was Kazuhiko Torishima, who's Toriyama's original editor at Shueisha, and he went on to be a major honcho within the corporate structure there at Shueisha. He said, what if we edit the old series and put that on TV? So Dragon Ball Z Kai, yes, was made to be closer to Toriyama's vision. That's what they said. What they actually wanted to do was fill time, indoctrinate new audience to Dragon Ball, get that back on TV. But you can see between that decision and then bringing him Toriyama nudging Toriyama to look at Battle of Gods, and then respecting him basically rewriting the entire film, respecting what he wrote for story outlines for Super. Along the way, they have always kowtowed to Toriyama and allowed him to write what he wants to write and respect what he wants to write and roll with what he wants to do. Yes, there's editorial influence along the way. We know the Broly movie was one of several topics that were suggested as a possible movie, but Toriyama went with Broly, and so they went with Broly too. We're not going to have that anymore. The closest we're going to have is probably Akio Ioku, who, splintered off and formed his own company, Capsule Corporation Tokyo. He seemed to be truly Toriyama's right-hand man. Greenlit Sandland without anyone else saying okay. As I've said lately, maybe Ioku truly is King Ioku, and we should all bow to our new fearless leader. He's done good so far, but we are in a unique situation without the Toriyama Sensei. What do you think? We can't do that anymore. I don't know. All right, Heath, good.
No, I mean, I'm in full agreement with that, because it's this really weird crossroads that unfortunately many franchises have had to deal with, and we find ourselves in this boat. But, the almighty dollar a lot of times does speak, whether we like it to or not. As fans of the series, I tend to agree with Mike that at some point I would like it to just ride off into the sunset, and maybe down the road throw us a movie every once in a while, or just something. But at the same time, before Daima even started, Dragon Ball was like the top grossing franchise for Toei. They didn't even have a series yet. There's no movies, but between overseas licensing, video games, merchandise, within Japan, even without a series, and this was true even with Kai, they made so much money. It's the top grossing series, the top grossing franchise that they own. The rights alone is where they make most of the money. I think their overseas finances it's insane between them, One Piece, and who am I missing, Mike?
It's usually for a Bandai, it's usually Gundams up there as well.
Yeah. So I think that will speak to a lot of it. I think we will have more. How quickly it comes, I don't know. I think that is the question. Do they let it breathe for a little while? And Do they go with more of a movie format like they did for a little while before we had Super? Because we know they had other ideas. We know that they have the Dragon Ball Super manga that is basically a palette that they can use, or a template that they can use to develop another series. I mean, for so long there were rumors online of a sequel Dragon Ball Super TV series. So I mean, that will be floated out there forever until it actually happens. Especially now that the content is there, Toriyama was involved. I think that's inevitable. When, I have no idea, but I think we have to face the reality that it's going to steamroll forward. At what pace, I think, is really the question.
Yeah, I think my personal preference, I think as more stuff comes out that's like brand new series, brand new stories that had no involvement with Toriyama, I'll probably feel less obligated to watch it. It'll probably be like how I approach new anime series in general, where I'll check it out if it looks promising, and if I'm not feeling it, I'll not feel bad about dropping it. Whereas I feel a little bit more invested in the stuff that I know came from Toriyama to some extent. However, to Brand's point, if we get the Dragon Ball, a full-fledged remake, like they're doing with One Piece, not that we know if that's actually going to be good, but that kind of prospect of like a Hunter x Hunter 2011 treatment for the original Dragon Ball manga is my kind of ideal adaptation. So I would love to see that.
Yeah, the money being in the licensing stuff is, I think, in a way, no better illustrated than things like the bubble popping gacha game I play, which always needs new content for people to spend money. Since it came online 9 years ago, worldwide it has grossed over 3 billion USD. And if you stop that, unfortunately, as you folks were saying earlier, if you stop the creation of new characters and storylines and other things, that gravy train's going to slow down. And, I'm sure that, Bandai Namco, all the powers that be, really enjoy having an extra $30 million a month to play around with. Like, it just, for better or for worse, that's the way it's going to be. So, yeah, we'll see. I mean, I have a little bit of faith in a way, like, correct me if I'm wrong, obviously the people on this podcast can do so better than anybody else on the planet in my opinion, but I'm pretty sure like the DB Fighter story Toriyama wasn't really involved in at all, sans designing Android 21, and that got generally good reviews, like not only just the game but the actual story of the game, like the original kind of piece. So, it's a small slice of evidence, but at least it's something saying that, other folks can sort of carry that torch, albeit maybe only every so often in a quality way, but there's stories to do there, and maybe that just takes advantage of the simplicity in a way if you just make sure you have people who understand that and can hone that, since the story of Fighters is also rather simple. Like, it's something that I want to be optimistic about, and normally I'm pessimistic, but for some reason for Dragon Ball and stuff, I would like to be optimistic about it.
Yeah, there's a couple things there. Yeah, Toriyama designed number 21, both her human form, for lack of a better phrase, and her Majin form. I would give a little pushback on people liking the story of Fighters. I'm not convinced anyone's ever actually finished the story mode of that game, because it's, I don't know, about 150 hours long, and
Oh wow.
oof, it's a rough one. I didn't care for it. But that's the kind of thing, like, Toriyama picks and chooses and plays with his own action figures. We saw 21 canonized as Vomi in Superhero. So he plays with all of his things. And then to the point of the gravy train stopping with the new forms and all that stuff. I mean, look no further than Moro, Granola, Ultra Ego, Vegeta, Black Frieza. These things are sitting out there, And we don't know what the deal is. Don't listen to the people who say it's illegal for them to use them. Like, we've had JoJo characters, manga-only characters in JoJo video games before they were animated. Like, it's not illegal to do that. It's just that all the partners do have to agree with each other, get on the same page, pay whatever they got to pay to each other. And we're just at a unique point in Dragon Ball right now where the Dragon Ball Super manga is a monthly thing that's over in V-Jump magazine. So you already have that little bit of separation from it being in Weekly Shonen Jump, even though Shueisha still owns it. But even more so than that, Akio Iyoku was the editor-in-chief of V-Jump as Dragon Ball Super was being serialized. He's no longer with Shueisha. He made his own company specifically to go take rights to Dragon Ball stuff. So it's just... They don't know what to do with that stuff, which is why you see like all these reprisals of other stuff they can throw into the games and maybe even more unique original things that don't exist over in the manga there. Put Moro in the video games, you cowards.
I think, at least speaking outside of what will be, the Toei approved stuff going forward, the fans are always going to keep creating Dragon Ball stuff. I feel like there's always going to be fan projects, and whether it's just like animations on YouTube, fan games, fan art like that, Dragon Ball will live on whether it's legally approved or not, I will say.
Right.
Everybody has their OC.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the rest of my questions are specifically for the Kanzenshuu guys about their work and just utilizing their expertise. So one important question, we've talked about how Dragon Ball is one of the most popular manga and anime franchises of all time, worldwide. Yet here in North America, at least, it seems to be one of the hardest to legally consume in a good presentation, especially the anime specifically. So in 2024, how do you tell an interested American to start consuming Dragon Ball, whether it's the manga or the anime? And then kind of a second part to that, for the anime specifically, what do you think is the best that the classic anime has ever looked?
There's, again, great question, of which there are about 50 in there. So how do I tell someone to check out the series? Check out the manga. I mean, that is Toriyama's pen, his words. You're going to get the purest form of Dragon Ball. I don't mean that in a purist way. I mean that that's his art. Like, why, this kind of goes to multiple levels for me, but why wouldn't you want to check out like the original version of something? And to me, that extends to watching the series in Japanese as well, but that's kind of like a separate conversation. So I'm saying, if you want to check out Dragon Ball, just check out chapter 1, go from there. There's an asterisk for everything along the way, because we see this constantly these days. And I think this is a completely valid point. People tell you Dragon Ball is the best action comic cartoon there has ever been. You're going to love it. It's amazing. You start reading Dragon Ball, what do you see? Child penis, underage boobs, there's some poop. Yeah. And like, when you've been into it for so long, you kind of get desensitized to that, and you forget, oh, right, that's what the peel-off arc was. And you really have to kind of set the stage for like, okay, he did this thing before. It was called Dr. Slump, and it was a gag manga, and he was considered like one of the legends of gag manga, and it transitioned into an action series. And after about 13 episodes or however many chapters that is, like 20-ish, then you're going to get to a tournament, and then it's going to be great. So like, just hold on. Like, it's going to get really good. And you hate to say that, because then you hear like it gets good after 26 episodes. It gets good after 52 episodes. It gets good after the time skip in 500s or whatever it is. But I do think there is something undeniably classic about Dragon Ball from the very beginning. I think you start with chapter 1 or episode 1. You're going to have a great time. There's something just so whimsical and endearing about it from the start. But then, like, presentation and watching of things, I mean, there's so much to say there. I mean, DBZ specifically has just been devastated by the choices that Funimation made in 1994, in 1996, in 1999, in 2005, and in 2007 specifically. All of those very specific years have contributed to the downfall of the interpretation and presentation of Z specifically. And the ramifications we still feel, they're felt internationally through other licensors, that Toei says, oh, just take the Funimation masters. Like, All right, sorry, we didn't mean for you to get that version, but here, well, you have to suffer too. That said, I also push back on some of the like over. I don't even know how to describe it. Like the real kind of like audio file, video file aspect of it. And it's easy for me to say because I came in during the fansub VHS days. My 23rd Budokai fansubs, they're actually Nippon Golden Network recordings. There's a single episode that the tracking was so out of whack, I only have audio for that episode. And I fucking loved it. Like, that was the best thing I had ever seen, even though I literally saw nothing that episode. You know, it's a show from the 80s and the 90s. And yes, it can look incredible because there are film masters for this. And with a great film scan and proper restoration, this thing could look incredible. At the same time, it's also an old series. And sometimes it's okay for old things to look old. And that's been part of my problem with Funimation's dolling up of the series over the years. Is you look at all of those I just saw one going around again where it's like, what if Super looked like Z? It's like, that's not what Z looked like. That's what Orange Brick 2 looked like in 2007 with the blown out colors and everything's all smoothed out. Like, that's not actually what the series looked like. But at the same time, I don't know, man. It's tough. Like, Z is just an asterisk after asterisk of explanations and recommendations.
I think just to piggyback off what you said, Mike, about there's no better place to start than the original manga. My first reading of Dragon Ball really changed my view of the series as a whole because,
I bet, yeah.
You know, as a kid, you know, you experience what the anime was here dubbed and the way it's stitched out and like how long episodes feel. And then you read the manga for the first time and you get a real sense of like what the artistry of Dragon Ball is actually all about, and realizing that like Toriyama was just like not only an amazing artist, but like his paneling and the way he choreographed fighting is just like on another level. Like,
yeah, his command of the page is second to none. Absolutely.
Yeah. And, you know, there really aren't a lot of other comics that I had read to that point that illustrated motion through a page that way. And it really changed my respect for the series as a whole, just reading it.
I agree. The artistry is phenomenal. And that's why I've always enjoyed the manga. It's kind of weird because I go through these phases of I'll lean towards the animated product a little more, and then I'll go back to the manga, and it's kind of dependent on what's actually happening in the real world at the time. Like right now we're in a series, so I'm like real heavy production side of animation right now. And then later Julian will our cohort, who is not with us today, will pull me into the manga again, and we'll deep dive into a bunch of chapter pages that we haven't, you know, worked on in a decade. So that is always kind of fun. But yeah, like Mike said, it is an interesting road to follow because it's one of the few series ever that is never from finish to end just had a here it is. You know, not even as it was shown, just, hey, they gave us these masters, here it is. It was always the goal to modernize it as much as possible. And it was Dragon Ball in general came into North America at a really odd time because that's when, you know, we had like Speed Racer and Gundam and a few other series from the 1980s in Japan, a lot of which no one knew were from Japan at the time. It was never advertised. And so when Dragon Ball came, that was the same thing. We don't really want people to know this is from Japan. And so we want it to look this way. Even, and Mike can vouch for this. I remember when scanlations of original chapters out of Japan came to the United States, people would flip the image so that it was in a American comic book form. So instead of being read from right to left, it would be read from left to right, but all the artwork would be swapped. I mean, that's what was happening back then. Now, it was very common to Americanize or Westernize content, and Dragon Ball, specifically Dragon Ball Z, kind of fell in this weird era where we were really transitioning from we want to Americanize it and make it more of a Western palatable product. And where we were even just 15 years later of, wait, we want our shows like Naruto and Bleach and One Piece, we want them to be as accurate as they were in Japan. I want the exact same show. In fact, we're going to leave Japanese words in there. That was not a thing at the time. That is not how they adapted content. And that is what has plagued the series for so long, because it's so ingrained with so many people, and that is so hard to just turn around.
I can't get over it. You said Speed Racer and Gundam in the same breath, and that's just a bizarre combination. But to your point about the transition period, the thing I talk about feels like a lot lately. When Funimation brought things in-house down in Texas, they were on their Peter Bearing to Shuka Levy to Falconer to Menzel, like fourth replacement score by the time they were doing the movies. And this was also the era of like the real band. So you had Disturbed in the movies. That was something that anime companies had been doing for years, but had already long since abandoned. Like you think about the Street Fighter II animated movie. To be fair, going into Ryu kicking a truck driven by Bison, going into corn, that's something. That's something. But like that practice was done, and Funimation was late to the party on that. They were still by that point in the early mid aughts doing we got to hide this from people. It was
Funimation alone is just an interesting story of, you know, a little podunk company in the middle of Texas that had like done nothing, and then all of a sudden, hey, do you guys want Dragon Ball? Have at it. I mean,
nepotism and cyborgs, the Gen Fukunaga story.
Literally, my uncle works at Toei.
Shell shock.
The one time the uncle story is real.
Yeah, so sounds like no good answer. Hopefully in another 10 years, Viz will publish the Kanzenbans with a new translation from Julian, and
call us.
Someone will...
We've put the word out. So.
I'm sure.
I think it is interesting, just to jump back, of how far things have come. Of, you know, we talk about these things and we live through them, but we've also lived through what it is now. And in a way, I feel like it's worth what we went through to get to where we are. I just wish we could go back and kind of change some of the things to make them more like
speed this up, guys.
Now.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So
I mean, the fact that we have a simulcast and we can throw together an episode page with full credits, screenshots, synopses, summaries, just all sorts of analysis. I mean, within like 2 or 3 days of an episode airing, whereas even with Super, I mean, it'd take us a full week maybe to get through it.
And yet, at the same time, 6 days ago, Crunchyroll released Dragon Ball Z cropped in 16:9. How is this still happening?
This is the world we live in every day.
Insane. So speaking of, you know, this legacy of how Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z have been treated in the West that has brought us to where we are today, you know, Mike, you mentioned when you first got exposed to Dragon Ball, it was through, Funimation syndicated broadcast. But you were very into the Japanese side well before it became this huge phenomenon in the early 2000s in the Western world, at least in the US. And so it would make sense. Like, yeah, of course, Kanzenshuu is big. Dragon Ball is big in the US. Why wouldn't it be? But that fandom of, you know, the Funimation, Toonami, Dragon Ball Z in America is very different from the original Japanese version that your sites have very consistently focused on. So have you observed some, you know, missed opportunities as a result of that discrepancy? And have you ever had any temptation to cater to that larger audience in the West?
No, Heath will back me up on this. We do whatever we want to do because we want to do it, and we don't care if anyone else reads it, watches it, whatever. We'll make guides for ourselves because we needed that information to do something else. And cool, if someone else read it, that's great. I mean, yes, the audiences are different, but you know, I'm of two minds about it. Like, they're two different series, the dub and the original Japanese, but they're not. Like the same underlying things happen. Monkey guy hits lizard guy, and hair goes gold. Like all the underlying beats are there, and it's fun to get into the differences and explain to people like, okay, well, I went to the Japanese version. This is why I went to the Japanese version. Here are the things that I like about it. And I would love for you to enjoy the thing that I enjoy. And that's something that I transitioned into, where it's not about, like, I don't even want to talk about the dub. It's not because I don't like it, or rather, it's not because I want to tell you that it's bad and why it's bad. I would rather tell you why I love what I love than tell you why you love is wrong, if that makes sense. And I think that's how you change minds at the same time too. We have enough other stuff, like real life, the things going on in our world, to have actual arguments about, with life and death situations. I don't need to have those conversations about a dialogue change in the dub. So have we missed opportunities because of that? Like, I don't know how to answer that question. Like, what does that mean? Would our audience be 2, 3, 10 times larger than it is if we focused on the dub? I don't know. But we also wouldn't still be doing what we're doing if we didn't focus on the original Japanese version of the franchise, because that's the source. Kind of to my earlier point in story, when I got into Dragon Ball, and it's this show that's on TV that I find that I like. Okay, I don't know what anime is at that point. And yet I learn what I'm watching is not the original show. So I want to seek out the original version of the show because they're not giving it to me. I don't know what a weeb is at that point. I don't know what an anime purist is at that point. I just know that the show that you're showing me isn't the show. And so to me, it's always been about, I just want to know more about it. And that's what we aim to do with our site, is we want to be the place where people can, like, I got to know more about this. I got to know. The example is classic example for me, but the commentary track on DBZ Movie 1 Dead Zone, at some point, the voice actors tell you, like, we got nothing interesting to say. You might as well go take a pee break at this point. I will never have anything about our site be that. I always want to have a cool anecdote to share with you, something that I just learned, because I always want to be learning too. There's always something new and interesting to learn. And whether that's you're reading about the boil that Toriyama had on his butt because he was sitting too long drawing manga, like, that informs something about what he was working on. That's interesting to me. And I want to share that information.
I remember that commentary track.
A lot of people do.
Yep. I also think
plus everybody needs that confirmation that yes, in fact, one lady voices at least 3 characters from the same family.
Oh yeah,
and that is why they all sound similar. It is the same person.
Yeah, I think that's just like an unfortunate barrier for Western viewers, is that, like, for most people in the US, like, Sean Schemmel's voice is going to be Goku for them, and I think I respect the desire for people to watch it in the original, because that's as close as you get to, like you said, the same way that reading the manga is the closest you get to the original intent, because Toriyama handpicked Masako Nozawa to voice Goku because he heard her voice while writing it. So it's like, if it's like you said, you're not going to tell someone you shouldn't listen to Goku speaking in English, but if you really want the truest intent of it, like, this is where it is.
To me, it's just like, why wouldn't you want to learn more and have it inform something else? Like, even if you do end up still watching the dub, cool, man. Like, watch whatever you want to watch. But there's information out there. There's something that can color your viewing of something else. I think one of the best examples we had of that was Super, when we finally got a simulcast of it in pre-English dub. There was no precedent for what Goku Black sound like in English, other than, like, Xenoverse 2. And oh boy, that was like its own thing about what that initial performance was. But Nozawa, I think, really turned a lot of fans because they didn't go into it thinking like, oh, it's got to sound like this. And even if they went into it thinking it's got to sound like Evil Schemmel, they didn't have that in their head to directly compare it to. And I think that was one of those moments where I saw the newer generation of fans go through what I went through years prior, where it was, I don't know what I don't know. I've never seen this before. There is nothing else to compare this to. This is all there is. Let me just enjoy it and get absorbed into this world. And we've seen that with Daima. Yeah, just last month too.
Yeah, I think jumping back to my previous question about like, what you want to see from Dragon Ball now that there's no more Toriyama, I think another piece of that is like, if I were to watch a new Dragon Ball series starring any of the main characters in Japanese, like, she better be screaming out Kamehamehas until at least 100 years old.
Yes,
but
please.
if for any reason Nozawa can't be voicing those characters anymore, it's like, yeah, the ship of Theseus, like, what is left that is Dragon Ball as I knew it?
Yeah, I mean, you go back to episode 1. We no longer have Joji Yanami. We no longer have Hiro Mitsudu. Nozawa is still the last one there. We don't have Toru Furuya anymore for different reasons. But
I mean, I think it says a lot that in Daima, we had this discussion on our podcast, but everybody gets small. We have mini versions of everybody. Nozawa is the only one that stays because she is so the face of the franchise now and has been forever. Because, Toriyama was not a visual person. He was very much behind the scenes. Nozawa is the one that really was there that everybody knows. And especially a lot of people that got involved, as Mike said, simulcast of Super is when a lot of people got exposed to that. Now we have Daima. And we anticipated that they would be making some voice changes, but I think it says a lot that they kept her and said, we can't have an entirely new cast of people and not have her. And it'll be very interesting down the road what they do when she's either no longer around or just says, I can't do it anymore. But the thing is, she wants to. And I mean, she said that she'll do it forever if she can.
Right. Now, I'm not aware of any other fan sites that are dedicated to a single manga or anime franchise that are anywhere near the level of what Kanzenshuu is now, or even what Daizenshuu or Kanzentai were before. Why do you think it is that people haven't really taken the initiative to give that kind of treatment to other major franchises that could warrant it?
So I want to give a shout out because there are a couple. There's Empty Movement for Utena. There's Rumik World for Rumiko Takahashi Works. There's the JoJo Wiki, which is one of the only great independent. This is the Transformers Wiki. I think a lot of people point to as well. So maybe that like kind of counts. But it's a wiki, but it's also kind of like a website in and of itself. Longtime kind of friend of the site, Dogasu's Backpack, specifically for the Japanese version of Pokemon, I think is a great example. Then if you want to talk about Pokemon, it's games, but Cerebi is kind of like the quintessential example of kind of like a Kanzenshuu equivalent for the video games of that. There are a few, but think about all those things that I just said. So you've got Utena, you've got Rumiko Takahashi, you've got Araki JoJo's, you've got Pokemon. These are all old people too.
Icons.
Yeah, but all icons of their mediums as well. Sure. But I think for me, it's specifically that they're old. And so it's people from our generation. What do we know how to do? We know how to make websites and we know how to make fan sites. That's what we started doing. And we have the inertia to continue doing that. I don't know if there's a Kanzenshuu equivalent for, what did the kids call it? The Jujutsu Kaisens? Is there a fan site for that? I don't know. Because I don't watch that show or read that series. Is it out there? Cool. I would love to know about it. And even though I just listed off a whole bunch of these, like I've had very limited conversations with these folks. I wish I talked to them more because I would love to trade war stories with these folks from what we've done over the years. So then there's a couple things there. The highest compliment that we can ever receive is, I wish there's a Kanzenshuu for blank.
Exactly.
Insert series here.
I always
that
say
means so much to me. So I answered questions that you didn't ask, I think. So then I'll let Heath answer whatever you did actually ask. You might need to repeat the question.
Well, I think number one, we are just more insane than anybody else.
That's true. Yeah, you have a visual of my room. Here, Heath will keep talking. I'm going to turn the camera around. You can get a little bit of an insight into.
I think my basic answer that I fall back on is it is a generational thing. I think it really is when it comes down to it. At the end of the day, there's many other factors that are involved. Your passion for one thing, your passion for other things that are intertwined with what you like to do, whether it be, hey, you're really into video games or web design, and you mix all those things together. That's kind of what drives a lot of what we do. We're also wired a little different, I think, in ways, but that's just a personal thing. But I know many other people that are wired just like us, and they don't have massive fan sites, but it really is generational, because this was, like Mike said, what we did when we were in middle school, when we were in high school. It carried on into college.
Like, what was I going to do? I was going to make hypercard stacks and web pages. Like, that's all there was.
I mean, fan sites were the thing. A lot of people had them. A lot of our friends had them. And then they just slowly started dying off as the internet changed. And then you started to see more kind of like blog stuff pop up. A lot of people did that for a while. And then now we are in the more digital era of video and just how easily accessible it is. But we are also from the generation of, like, my dad's a big historian. We read a lot of books. We read a lot of comics. The written word just kind of surpasses everything. And it is so much easier to track down information within the written word somewhere than it is to watch a video. And I'm not here to slander anybody that YouTube videos.
How
or
many
TikToks
times?
or whatever.
I mean, blah, 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 blah. Chapter 6 walkthrough minus video. Because, like, dude, just tell me where I need to go in this goddamn stage. I don't need to watch your video for that. I just want to do Control F and see which hallway I need to go down.
Yes.
For lack of a better term, you guys are like the old guard of a lost art, because nowadays the fan site is a conglomerate thing. There's like the fandom.wiki where you're right. Like Jujutsu Kaisen probably does have a wiki page, and all these new animes, I'm sure almost all of them have a wiki page, but they're pre-made templates that people are plugging into, and they just don't have the same love and attention to detail that you guys put in.
And more importantly, they're creating content for other people to monetize. They don't own any of that stuff that they've made. They're just doing it on someone else's platform, and that can go away. And as we experienced this weekend, well, even something you own can kind of have some technical problems, and then Heath and I spend 48 hours panicking over things too. But at least you own it, and you can say, "Hey, here's my data. Let's get it back online." That's a different tangent entirely about the cost, the literal cost of running your own stuff.
Yeah, and that feeds into one of our later questions, but just going to any of these other new age fandom sites, and I just want to see some lore on a character, and like a pop-up video is in the corner screaming at me, and I'm like, I have to find the mute button as fast as I can.
It is impossible to go to a fandom page and not have a crash Safari on your iPhone. Like, it is inevitable. Thanos is inevitable, and your iPhone crashing is inevitable. And also, why don't
Android?
I just want to know who the voice actor for this character is. Why don't you list that in the info box? This is like the most obvious thing. Who voices this character? Yeah. I have a lot of thoughts on this subject, in case you don't know, and I would love to see more questions.
Yeah, those wikis are the thing, and I was also thinking, like, every anime and manga out there has at least 2 dedicated subreddits as well, which is where all of the speculation goes, and of course the culture wars of who is a true fan and who is not. And once one subreddit becomes too toxic, it forms into another one that's just called like Jujutsu Kaisen 2 or something like that. No, that's about as close as we can get. The thing about the pages that like you guys make and stuff reminds me, and the video game one is a really good one, of the old fashioned like game FAQs written with like ASCII font stuff.
Give me the ASCII art. Yep.
Yeah, you get the ASCII art, and then it's just
we should start incorporating those.
Yeah,
Goku and Vegeta ASCII arts on every page. Make them hidden. But yeah, that's what it reminded me of, and that's what I also miss about, especially guides for old RPGs that I'm playing, like the old Final Fantasies and stuff, that it's just like, please tell me which one of these boxes I'm supposed to open, and then we can go forward with our lives, and that can be relatively hard to find now.
Well, and I think that's one of our philosophies is being that archive of things that you can't find any place else. We have an ongoing joke. It's not even an inside joke anymore. Everybody does it, but Mike and I will be like, "Oh man, we're working on this guide. We need to go look something up," and we'll Google it. And our website is like the only one that has it, and we're just giving ourselves our own result every time. And it becomes like, this has to be out there somewhere. Somebody had to write this down. It has to exist, and we just go in the circular loop.
I think a great example of that is during the early syndication broadcast, there's an episode called The Relentless Raccoon, or was it called No Refuge from Raccoon? Because only the original syndication broadcast had one of those titles, and it was changed on the home video releases. And I kept looking at this, and all my tapes were stored away somewhere, and I couldn't find them. So I'm looking, and the only search result I can find for it is me on Usenet 25 years ago, talking about this exact same thing. Eventually I did dig up the tape, and so I was able to capture. I took an off-screen recording, like, here's proof that this title card existed at one point in time. But yeah, all too often I'll search for an answer to something like, oh, I wrote that 20 years ago. Cool. Thanks, Pass Mike.
Yeah.
Pat self on the
But
back.
I think that it really goes back to our philosophy of documenting and archiving. And that's a lot of what we do. We still do the guides, but I feel like a lot recently, especially probably what Mike since Battle of Gods, we've really transitioned into, we need to historically document some of the stuff because it's just not out there. And to kind of piggyback off of your previous question, I think a big mainstay for us as far as between dub and Japanese versions, we've not only stuck because, it's the original, but it's also the one that is international, that everybody across the globe has experienced. We talk to people in Europe. We have friends that live over there. We can talk about the same version because many other people haven't seen the American dub. We have people. It's fun to look at all the people that visit our website and how many people, like in Japan, in the area, Asian area, Australia, visit us. And it's just kind of weird how much of an international presence we kind of have without intentionally really doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a lot of really great segues here. I want to really quickly touch on a lot of really good points that were brought up here. I think that makes total sense that it is this generational thing because, I think in addition to the fandom wiki template, which you have to hit precisely 4 close buttons on a web browser anytime you open up one of those pages. But in addition to all of those for, every series, I guess the fan sites of today are the YouTubers, right? But our generation, we grew up looking at text on the internet and expecting to find everything in text and being able to Control F or Apple F and have that easily accessible archival information that you can Google for. So that's why I guess I have this perception that these things don't exist, because today's audience, that's not the kind of content that they expect, but it's the kind of content I expect. And also what you guys were saying about, kind of some of your initial motivations for making the site. I've become good friends with Justin Savakis in the past few years, who was the original founder of Anime News Network, among many other things. And, he very quickly sold it off to other people who run it. But that was basically his story of like, it was 1998. I was bored in easy college classes. I wanted a web design project. I felt like there weren't enough English language sites that were covering, anime news. So I made it for myself. And, it's become a huge site since then. So, it seems like the best projects.
It's almost a staple site of, if that Anime News Network were ever to disappear, how much information for decades would just be lost.
Definitely. Yeah, so the best projects are passion projects.
Yes. And we're also control freaks, so we really like having our own platform that we can modify to exactly the way we want it. And Mike can say, hey, I wanted it to look like this, and then we just do that. And that's much more difficult to do on any sort of wikia or fandom because you're kind of beholden to whatever the template says you can do. So that is one nice thing is we just have complete control.
Right.
It's also open to everyone, which is nice.
Yeah. So speaking of a Kanzenshuu wiki, if such a thing were to ever come about, we have been teased about that prospect for a long time. I have been excited about it for a long time. I literally have like a Excel spreadsheet of like, Phantom Post Radio guest ideas, and I've had, the Kanzenshuu guys on there forever. And as a note, I was like, maybe we'll get them when the wiki goes public. I've had that in there for probably, 5 years, maybe more. So I didn't wait. But what is the current status on that project, and is there any sense of when it might be available to the public?
I mean, current status is like nothing's ever finished. And that's the kind of thing that we're, I don't want to say struggling with, but kind of reckoning with is that, like, how do you don't finish a new wiki for a series? Like, we're never going to finish Kanzenshuu. So we kind of have to think about, okay, what is the base level of stuff we want to have absolutely complete in there for when it launches? Because maybe that stuff, other things are dependent on those things existing, or, we just want to put a good foot forward with that stuff being there. But I'm also coming around to like, we're just going to launch this goddamn thing. We got to get this thing live and let people take a look at it. So I don't know, 2025, those are an interesting series of numbers. What could that mean? I don't know. Who could say? Yeah, it's an interesting place. We actually just onboarded 2 new editors this last week, so that's been fun. Longtime fans and excellent writers are getting in there. The challenge there is, to Heath's earlier point, we are clinically insane. I don't mean to use that in an ableist way. I almost mean that literally. Like, we are control freaks to an extreme degree, and very little of even our own work lives up to our own expectations. That can be tough for new people coming in and trying to do stuff with us. And we realize that. So that's been a challenge over the years. We're like, hey man, you use the wrong it's. That's not cool. That kind of stuff. Like, we're serious about that. But to an earlier point, like, we continue to make all these new friends along the way, and we're finally, I think, finding the right people that are just as wild and crazy as we are about this stuff, and truly do love putting in 17 citations for one thing. Like, that's important to all of us. We want to have it in there. And the folks that find that fun, like, those are the right people you want to have working on that.
We're all very neurotic.
Good word. That's it.
I mean, I definitely go into pages just because somebody accidentally coded something very, very slightly wrong, and I can see an extra space underneath something.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I will go fix that immediately because it drives me crazy. But other people, it doesn't, and I get it. So the struggle has been, where do we draw the line? And we've had that discussion.
Every day.
The wiki does exist. You can go preview some of the pages. It's there. There's much more behind it that we haven't made public yet. And we're slowly kind of adding some things. But I am ready to, in the local settings file, just put that asterisk of, all of the files are now visible instead of the long array string that we have of every single page that we are allowing public access to.
Nice.
I was like, it's getting pretty long at this point, and yeah, it's been a really fun project to work on. I think I handed a lot off because I just I couldn't do the day to day, and I couldn't do honestly watching certain things happen because I'm so used to doing that myself that I kind of had to step back and say, okay, somebody else is going to run with this and I'm going to be okay with it. And then 10 years later, I will come back in and kind of edit things the way I want. So no, it's coming. But we've said that forever. I think originally even, was it Constantine? We used to make the joke before Battle of Gods was announced even that will be done by 2045 or something like that. That we came up with an arbitrary number that we never thought we'd get to, and unfortunately, it looks like we're going to get to that and maybe beyond. So, who knows?
Now, we have touched upon this a bit, and obviously I'm excited for it. But as devil's advocate, I'm sure some people would say, "What guys? There's already a Dragon Ball wiki out there, right? There's one for every series, right? Why do we need yours?"
Mike, how big do you want your soapbox to be?
Yeah. Building it. There's a box on top of soap on top of another box. I'll give you two answers to that. One is Majin Piccolo and Goku's birthday. Those are kind of like the two go-to examples here. The great thing about these open wiki platforms is that they're completely democratized. Anyone can read them. Anyone can edit them. It's wonderful for broad information. It is terrible for trolls and specific information. One of the most common rumors you'll see out there is that Toriyama originally intended to also have Piccolo fall under Babidi's spell during the Buu arc of the series. Why do people think that? Because one person wrote that on the Wikia page back. It's Fandom now, but on the Wikia page back in the day. And it just hid away in a page somewhere and became accepted truth. Similar thing with what is Goku's birthday? A single person made a single edit in all of the Wikia platform. I think technically they might have had an MCU edit prior to that. I have an entire article about this. Snuck it into an article and just said, yeah, it was written in the manga, but not the anime, or maybe vice versa there. And just became accepted truth because it was in a wiki article there. Because it's too big, there's not real oversight on that stuff, and it just becomes accepted truth. This cannot stand. We will do something about this. That's part of it. There's certainly also those wikis, they lean heavily towards Funimation's English dub, and that's what they use, whether that's the basis of character names or even just in-universe information. Well, we have a spin on that. We're focusing on the original Japanese version of the franchise. That's not to say I don't have entire articles all about English dub stuff that even Mike Vegito EX has written about Funimation English dub stuff. Because I think it's important. I think it's historically important to have a record of all that stuff properly cited there as well. So I think there's enough to differentiate it. But the major thing is simply, this is information from people you can trust. So like you go to a page, you're not going to just have a random tidbit snuck in there that no one happened to see, because there's only a few of us working on this thing and we all see what everyone is doing.
And if there is a tidbit like that, we're going to cite it.
Yeah. Right.
So, yeah, I think threefold is, we struggled a lot with how are we going to integrate this with the existing website and the content that we have. And we're both, realists. We understand that we're not going to be doing this forever. We're at some point we won't be here. Things need to carry on, but also, like Mike said, it's a website. It's never going to be finished. There are always things that are going to happen. And how can we marry those two things where we now have other people that can also kind of carry that load instead of just, between the two or three of us, we cannot do an entire wiki. We're already doing the website. But it also gives us a really, almost an advantage of having other people look at things from a different point of view or different expertise that we don't necessarily have. And then we can incorporate that into the website as well, or we can use the website to link to the wiki as a reference. And then in there will be all of the references to all the different sources that, and you can go back to the main website and maybe find that translation of an interview. It just is, it's going to be a great way for us to kind of merge those two things together. And that's kind of how we talked ourselves into it. It definitely was what, Mike? It took us a year or two of just talking about it before we finally let's just pull the trigger and do it.
Yeah, and then a decade of false starts along the way. But to your point, Heath, about like what is the purpose of the wiki separate from the website? I really see it as a compliment. I like doing things like our rumor guide entries, where these are kind of like this curated tour through information. Like, here's a question that I'm going to answer over this span of paragraphs, taking you through, okay, there's this thing, but did you know about this thing? This actually relates to this. And that's a much better format for something like that than a wiki article with a sentence and a number, a sentence and a number. It's very academic. And I like having articles on the site that are different from that do give you that tour through that information. I think the greatest example is probably the intended endings guide that former cohort Jake Herms was the real spearhead for on the site. I think that's a perfect example of like main website content where it's this expert analysis of things. And yeah, we're going to give you the source. Like, we're going to tell you what book, this interview was from. But it's not going to be sentence number.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it's definitely a different structure of what we had been used to. So it is much more academic, which I think we both appreciate, but at the same time, we really enjoy what we do with the website and being able to write those articles, more in-depth analysis, things that aren't, you wouldn't pick up an encyclopedia and just start flipping through it and, oh, here's this nice article about this. No, it's going to tell you when it happened, who was involved, the dates, the time, and just step-by-step locations. And that's not a lot of what we always do. There are certain things that just don't fit within that realm of writing style. So, yeah,
definitely.
I think,
go ahead.
I think your, like you said, the academic approach and your dedication to accuracy and citation is important and only going to become more important as, the internet continues to decentralize and, the more misinformation that's out there, especially like you said, when someone makes an edit on a wiki and it becomes common enough knowledge to people, that misinformation is going to be represented to a lot more people nowadays, because you might Google Goku's birthday and Google's AI result, the first thing you're going to see might be that misinformation, because the way this information gets around.
Promoted by official company accounts as well.
Yeah.
I mean,
Bandai Namco doing Trunks' birthday, like that doesn't exist. So I actually had to change text on the Goku's birthday rumor guide article because I had copied and pasted from the comicbook.com or whatever article, like the actual text verbatim from their wrong article. And the Google AI was transcribing that text from our page as if it was real information. So I unfortunately had to do, like, this is bad for screen readers, but I had to put a screenshot of their text without alt text on it, just so Google wouldn't pull the wrong information and say it was right information from our page about how it was wrong information.
Such a mess.
Yeah, it's a disaster. But I mean, splitting the difference a little bit, even if you go on the Fandom wiki site, sometimes there is a citation. And what does it say? Daizenshuu 2. First off, what's a Daizenshuu? Second, what is the second Daizenshuu? Third, is it an article? Is it an interview? Is there a page number that goes along with it? Like, okay, like you almost did half a step on that citation. But we're the folks who like actually know those books, that own those books, can read those books, can tell you what the page number was. Like, what's the context for what that citation is? I think that's what we bring to the table that other folks, quite frankly, can't do.
Now, this is another good segue. What is the biggest misconception about Dragon Ball that you just need to clear up anytime it comes across your path?
All right. Kanzenshuu.com/rumor.
I figured that'd be your answer.
I mean, number one with the bullet is Toriyama wanted to end the series with Frieza. I mean, there's an entire thing about that. That's not true. We have Toriyama literally on the record while writing that portion of the series saying, I don't want to end it. I don't know how much more concrete you can get than that. Even though you think you know that's true and you've read it in other articles, that doesn't make it true. And that goes to that same earlier point about it. Something just gets written and spread around as accepted truth. I don't know where he said that, but he definitely said it somewhere. Where is that somewhere? I think another one that's really, what really grinds my gears, folks, is the other one going around is folks truly not understanding the history of Funimation and thinking that Funimation began in 1999 with season 3 broadcast on Toonami. And in the Rumor Guide article we have about this, I'm like, guys, Terry Clayson wrote the script in episode 53. He also wrote the script in episode 54, which was Funimation in Texas. Like, they even carried over some of the Ocean Studios script writers into that portion of the series. Barry Watson was overseeing the voice recording. Like, all the exact same people that worked on those 2 seasons of syndication broadcast worked on season 3, except the literal voices coming out of their mouths and then the musical score. And Funimation's just done so much Funimation doesn't even really exist anymore in name only. It's Crunchyroll, but it's all still the same company. But they did so much to distance themselves from that. Like, even when you look at the Rock the Dragon set, they would say, like, the Saban dub, like, okay, like, yes, but no at the same time. Like, there's always this, like, disassociation from it being them. Like, it was always Gen Fukunaga. It was always Barry Watson. Like, all the people that made it were the same people that made it.
Ron was just dealing with distribution.
Right.
That was
so
it.
You had Saban, you had Pioneer, you had Funimation, all these folks, but it was all the same people that worked on it. And, it's easy for me to say that because I lived through it. You have people that don't believe it. I'm like, I have news posts from that time on my website talking about how Funimation's bringing it in-house and how they originally had it before. Like, I lived through, I promise you I know what I'm talking about. But that's, one of the challenges that, whether that's anime or Dragon Ball, you always just have new folks coming in. And I just hope that we can drag them along for our ride so they can read these articles and learn that stuff and maybe work on some of that misinformation a little bit. So I think Goku's birthday, wanted to end at Frieza, and Funimation incorporation time. Those are probably three big ones right there for me. Heath, what do you fight against every day besides me?
Oh, that's the biggest one. I'll
the
take
biggest
it
misconception is that I'm a nice coworker. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, I'll take it in-house a little bit. I think one of the biggest misconceptions about Kanzenshuu specifically is that we are some official guidebook that is floating around out there.
It's in the Kanzenshuu. I saw it.
Yeah. We get tagged a lot all over as if, I read it in the Kanzenshuu that was, published by Shueisha. We're like, that's not a thing. we are a website, and so we've had to get online a lot and kind of be like, hey, this is us. I wrote that. Yep. And
this is a scan from the Kanzenshuu. Okay, what you actually have is a screenshot of a fan translation from Kanzentai, which is the old version of the site that merged into this website. Misconception of what the word scan means. That's another one for me.
That drives me crazy. Oh my gosh. I see that all the time, and it's just like,
that's a photograph. That's
something
not a scan.
Starts digitally to begin with. You can't scan it. It's not a physical object. Yeah. I'm neurotic like that. So it's just kind of one of those technicalities that it's one of those terms that just stuck around from when we did actually scan things to now everyone's just like, well, I got a scan of it. And it's like, well, you got a digital copy of it. It's a totally different thing. Anyway, misconceptions about the series itself is something I don't really...
the thing you just mentioned.
Yes,
they had a little more of an excuse when one of those sites was called Daizenshuu, and
no,
are called Daizenshuu.
I take full responsibility for this confusion. However,
I mean, we totally understand where the confusion comes from. That is, we just find it hilarious because it's kind of like, hey, they went out and bought this book. And it's like, I don't know how you just bought a whole website.
Where do I purchase the Kanzenshuu? Please direct me.
Dude, if we could, I tell you. I don't know. I think my one misconception that I run into a lot, not as much now as what we used to, was the concept that it is what is Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z is one continuous series. That you find so many people of like, well, I've only ever read Dragon Ball Z. It's like, well, I hate to tell you, but originally there was no such thing as Dragon Ball Z is an exclusive anime only name. The manga as it was coming out was just continuous chapter 1 through 519 Dragon Ball. Dragon Ball Z is something that was developed where they went to Toriyama and they say, hey, we have a good break here. What do you want to call it? And Toriyama said, well, Z is the last letter of the alphabet. Let's just go with that. Because he's like, once I'm done with this, we're not going anywhere else. And so there's this misconception from people that only watch the anime, and some of them will fight you on it. And it's very intriguing because it's just kind of like, these are facts, but
of course,
so that's my high horse.
Going back to how much the way that these properties have been handled in the West informing these misconceptions, of course Viz has primarily released them as Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, the manga series. Only in like their most recent re-releases have they gone back and called it all Dragon Ball. And
that's really in large part because the anime series did come out in North America prior to any of the manga.
Exactly.
And
If we were at a point where Naruto did not come to the US until Naruto Shippuden, then it could have been the same kind of situation, right?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, I think Cain, I kind of gave you that whole backstory when you stayed at my house a couple weeks ago, actually, right?
Pretty much, yeah. You gave me the full lowdown.
Yeah. So go ahead.
The only other one that I had as someone who's on the production side of things with animation and really diving into that, when Dragon Ball Super specifically was being developed and produced, there was a lot of discussion about, well, everything's digital and how does that's why everything looks this way, and
animated it with computers,
and everything was made with computers, and it's like we had to really step back and kind of do a little education session on, even today, all of the key animation is drawn by hand with a pencil on a piece of paper. And it was like, no, it's not. It's like, it is. And there's pictures of it. That's just how it's done. Then it is scanned into a computer. And then from there, it's digitized. But everything is still completely done by hand because there are a lot of people that, especially with a few animators, that their style had changed over the years, and a lot of people contributed that to. They were drawing things digitally on a pad, and it's like that's just not really true. And even today, there are animators out there that completely do everything digital, and there are still animators that do things by hand on a piece of paper and it's scanned in. The end result is that it's all digital, but the original image and everything is hand drawn.
Yeah, that's actually, I hadn't thought about that, but that's one of my biggest misconceptions for anime in general that I often have to educate people on. Because they assume that digital means that there was no hand drawing on a piece of paper involved. I'm like, no, okay. The backgrounds, hand painted, scanned in. The key animation, depending on the animator, could have been on a piece of paper, could have been on a tablet, and then digitally colored, digitally composited. Yeah.
Well, and then now we've entered the fun realm. This happened toward the end of Dragon Ball Super and is currently happening in Dragon Ball Daima, where a lot of how do I say this? A lot of the lines are being drawn are being amplified or toned down or enhanced through digital forms,
right,
so they look more hand drawn.
Yep.
And it's very intriguing how we've kind of turned that clock back and kind of gone back in that direction. And even from a production standpoint of we went through this weird phase of making everything look modern and clean and tight, and now you have so many things of I want it to look older. I want to insert that grain.
Mhm.
I want it to
And
look
now you have
like
a
I
grain
shot this
filter on the
with
tournament
camera.
power.
Yeah.
Yes. And
Yep.
so it's weird.
Yeah, that I'm not going to make this tangent very long, but just to talk about like even American animation, which the big difference in major American animation studios versus Japanese is that American animation studios were going all 3D CG for everything since Pixar was so successful, and then like Spider-Verse primarily came along and was like, hey guys, you can make it with computers and models and rigging and still have it look like a cartoon or a comic or a painting or a hand drawing. That's okay. That's a thing you can do. And then everyone loved that, and now DreamWorks has 3 movies that look like that, and Disney has a movie that looks like that, and we're starting to see, what if things looked like they were made by hand again? So it is very interesting to see that come back around.
Yeah, we go through phases.
Yeah.
And then we get full CG movies. So there's that.
Yeah. Right. That's true.
One quick comment about the rumor guide that I love is the labels for the rumors, because there's things that are unequivocally true, things that are unequivocally false. And then you have some labels where it's like, maybe, sorta, not really. It's technically. I love that.
Especially as we have to change them over the years, and Mike has to go in and update them because new information came out.
Yeah.
You love
one
that.
of the original ones I had was that future Trunks can turn Super Saiyan 2, and that was not true for the longest time. All of a sudden, Super came around, and oh well, now he does have that transformation. I got to change that rumor guide article. It wasn't something I ever anticipated changing.
Now, given the fact that Kanzenshuu is in fact not a book that you can purchase from Shueisha, it is just a hobby that you guys have done outside of your normal jobs. How do you balance that? How do you prioritize it? Decide what you're working on? And do you have any sort of like schedule? Like, all right, after work, I'm going to put in this much time on the site or anything like that?
How do we do it? Poorly, I think, is the answer to that question. It goes in phases. I'm particularly lucky these last few years. I do work from home. So my schedule, prior to this, I had the last job I worked at for about 9 years. I had an hour commute each way by car. That was my podcast time, so that was something. But I've made up for that now with walking and sleeping, and that's a wonderful thing. So, but it does allow me to adjust my schedule as need be. If I got to hop on to do something for 15 minutes, like that's not a problem anymore. As I'm at home on my own stuff. Fridays in particular, I take a late lunch break and watch Daima when it debuts. It's just a wonderful, perfect situation. It really changes over the lifetime of us as people, as families grew in particular. That all changed. There was a time when I could have Julian just come hang out for weekends at a time, and he could go sit at the prefectural library wherever he was and just sit there and cart out magazines. Well, I always got 3 kids and it's got a full family. Like, you can't do that kind of stuff anymore. So we do what we can when we can. How do we prioritize? Well, like, we're going to do the Daima episode guide pages kind of first and foremost. That's important to us. There's a lot of stuff like that where it's important that we do it when it's new. So it's much easier to do then than it is to go back and do later. But like we were talking about earlier, we work on things that we want to work on that are fun for us. I love working on rumor guide articles. Like, it's a little bit of creative writing, even though it's also academic writing at the same time. I love the mix of that. That's fun for me. I get something out of that personally, creatively, and other people find it useful too. So I work on that. Heath, I know you love, like, your job is not sitting in code, so that can be fun for you. I don't understand that at all, but it can be for you to just sit and be like, all right, I'm just going to translate all these animators for this episode. I'm going to whip up some new CSS that works on this page and formats everything properly, and you just have a great time doing that.
Oh, it's so fun. You have no idea.
It has its moments, right?
No, it's kind of what we talked about. We're really, I think we work well together because we like the same subject matter, but in different ways. And so that kind of complements everything. Julian also is very scholarly. He's a teacher, and so a lot of his aspects of when he comes at things is very technical, and he's very good at documenting and translating. And then we've just kind of combined that all, and the day to day varies. It does depend on what's going on. I mean, I feel not like rejuvenated, but I feel like more that I need to commit myself to doing some of the diamond stuff while it's live, and then to jump around between other things. And that's the really fun part that I enjoy is for like a month I'll be like, man, I'm really into going back and updating a movie page that we don't have a page for, and I'll just work on that. And then when that's done, I'll be like, hey, while I was doing that, I cited this page in the manga that we have, and I noticed something that I think we could do better. And then I'll go back and work on that for a while. And then there's all these little rabbit holes that lead me all these different directions. And then at the end of the day, you're just like, what have I accomplished? And then you look back, it's either nothing or you've actually done something of substance. And it's just kind of enjoyable because we're not really pigeonholed into doing one thing. And we kind of do whatever interests us at that time. And even we've had moments of other fans coming to us and saying, hey, I was looking for that. Do you guys have that? And I'll be like, well, we do. But now that you brought it up and we're looking at it, I think we could do better, or we could do more, or more information's come out, or that page is a little old. We haven't updated that in 5 years. Let us go deep dive into this again. Or we do something on the wiki, and then that drives us to do something on the site. And it's just kind of this cyclical thing that that's how we keep it going. I don't just go, well, I'm going to work on every single episode page, and then I'm done, Mike. I'm out.
Right.
Kind of, we feed each other different bits of information, and along the way, I get to do some fun coding. I think if nobody has had a chance to look at it, if you haven't visited Kanzenshuu before, I like to promote our animation production guide that we have, because I cannot tell you how much time I put into that to develop from what we used to have, which was a static page for every series that just listed people and episode numbers. And it was very old. It was the most 1990s pages we probably had on the site of just straight text. And it's so much more than that now. I cannot even begin to tell you what the coding is like behind the scenes to pull everything in. And that really was something that I challenged myself to do. It was something I had never done. A lot of that coding is JavaScript and jQuery and CSS, and marrying a lot of that stuff together and using some database information that runs in the background. And it was a lot of fun and also terrifying at the same time. So
For sure.
To kind of answer your question, I think that's really how we keep it going as far as creating content. But like we've discussed before, even all the friends that we've made along the way, of our interactions with them, talking to them daily, or even when, hey, I get tied up with work and family stuff and I'm gone for like a month and don't exist. And then I can just come back and everyone's just like, yeah, he's back. And Mike's like, oh, great. And we just kind of, we roll with it. But I think for the most part, I mean, we talk on the regular, whether we're working on site stuff or not. And there's always something that comes up. There's always something that Mike breaks that needs to be fixed. And there's always something that I break and then tell Mike, I'm really sorry. It's going to take me forever to fix this. But
Yeah, you didn't put the voice credit for Hebus in the recent episode. I fixed that for you.
yes, I saw that actually.
I don't like working on like very broad. Like, I'm not going to do the page for movie 8. That is the most boring thing that I could possibly do. But that one person who really wants me to do the manga guide page for Charisma Mission, the spin-off comic in Psycho Jump, that's exciting to me. Like, oh yeah, I will sit here and just flip through magazines and do page counts for you. All right, this is this chapter, and this is like a newspaper page. Do you count that as a chapter? I don't know, but I'm going to tell you what I think. That's the stuff that I find the most fun. And then you'll typically find me working on the site other than news posts. I want to the thing that no one's ever heard of before. That's the page I want to do.
Yeah, Heath, I definitely can empathize. Modernization refactors are the biggest pain in the ass and the most rewarding when you complete them, for sure.
Well, I can tell you, and you may appreciate this, and when we first decided to merge websites, we both ran static. I used a little more PHP to call up just static web pages, essentially, that were hidden off elsewhere, and tried to hide the URL structure and all that. Mike's was completely static. Just
so the best I had was server-side includes for the navigation on the left. Like that was the most dynamic thing I had on the site.
Uh-huh.
And so when we decided that we were going to merge and do that, we said, well, I think we are at the point that we need to use a content management system.
Mm-hmm.
What are we going to do? And we decided, let's use WordPress.
Right.
And I don't know how much we've
for better for worse. Here we are in 2024 with
we're
WordPress.
Stuck with it now because, I mean, you can't just undo that. But we developed our own layout. The theme, you can't find it anywhere else. We put it together. Everything's hand coded. And
no, there was only you. You're the only one who did
fine.
that.
It was me. And then Mike would approve of like color schemes and font selections and what have you.
Back in I got a cigar. I'm like, yes, correct. Yes, right color, right blue. Yeah, chomp.
He redlined the shit out of that thing. And so it really has been an adventure from a technology standpoint, because as much as you look at it and you're like, God, it's just a really old, fan site. Look at it sitting there. I think we've done a good job of keeping it modern, and our goal is to just keep doing that in a way that maybe others might not notice, so that we do have that longevity to keep moving forward. Because every time things change, then trust me, when you have to adapt like 3,000 pages to a new WordPress update, it is not fun. And most WordPress sites, on average, I would assume are 20 pages. So it's daunting at times. It really is. But when you love what you do, you just do it for free and whatever Mike tells you to do.
Now, speaking of doing it for free, we've talked about today's content creators, maybe sometimes light on the content, heavy on the ads, heavy on monetization, heavy on ways you can give them money. On the other hand, Kanzenshuu, the main site, has generally avoided any of that, even basic advertisements. Very recently just introduced a Patreon with very low tiers. So what is your philosophy behind this? Because I really don't really see that from anyone else in that kind of space. And has the addition of Patreon changed anything?
Why do we do it? I think it's the right thing to do. That's the landscape I came up in, where this was a DIY scene where you made cool pages and you shared cool information because that's what you do. Why would you do anything else? I feel strongly about that. You could go the route of information just wants to be free, man. And I've got a little bit of that in me, but I think it's important. I think someone needs to be doing it, and gosh darn it, it's going to be us. We're the ones that are going to be doing that. I think it sets us apart at the same time too. You go to the site and you don't see ads. You see very tiny little mention of there being a Patreon, something like that. It doesn't crash your phone browser. That's important to me. I think even if you don't notice that stuff, maybe subconsciously you do a little bit. There's something different about this. That
feels cleaner, feels less dirty.
Yeah, it's important.
Aesthetically, I really enjoy it.
Feels pure.
Yeah. And about the Patreon. So initially we started with ads on the forum exclusively for non-logged in users. And I really battled with that for a long time. And there's a thread somewhere where I asked the community, hey, would y'all be okay with that? And I had people that were like, yeah, I'm going to log out and only read it logged out. So you get the ad view. I'm like, please don't do that. That's terrible. But I really struggled with that because the server bills have piled up over the years. And this is another conversation you can get into. Once you do get a point as a content creator, you're beyond I'm just making videos. There's more to the business at that point. But I think a lot of the stuff we do, as seen with catastrophic hardware failure over the weekend on our server, like there are considerations that we have as a fan site that just don't exist for the content creator, that you don't have to worry about. Like this is all handled for you. What do you have to worry about? Copyright strikes and like your account being taken down, something like that. You don't have to worry that YouTube's not going to be available. Like, every once in a while there might be some like underlying DNS errors or something like that where you can't get somewhere. So I don't really know where I'm going with that. I was going back to asking for money for the first time through those forum ads. And then as just the ad industry kind of fell apart, what we were really looking for was, hey, can we just zero out the server bills for the month? Like that would be ideal for me, and kind of keep it at that original DIY kind of like no one's doing anything for any gain here, but also it would kind of help because, I'm a growing person. I'm in adulthood. I have my own job. I have to support my own self, my own family. It would be cool. People asked for years, like, how can we help? And I'm like, no, you can't help me. I'm like, all right, maybe I should finally allow people to help out there. And that's kind of where the Patreon grew out of, where it was, all right, the ad scene collapsed. It's not covering the bills anymore. Can we do this? And we really set it at the lowest levels of like, look, we can't commit to doing, bi-weekly podcasts. What is bi-weekly? Is it every other week or is it twice a week? I mean, whatever you want it to be. Like we can't commit.
Whatever's canon you want to be.
We can't commit to doing bonus episodes of this, and we're not going to have like all these guest articles. Like, as we said, like this is something we do in our spare time, so we can't make those above and beyond commitments. So let's keep it at that. Hey, you want to help us just keep the lights on every month? That's all we want to ask. And hey, if you want to hang out and chat with us, cool. And that's all we want to do. I don't want to do anything beyond that, because then the expectations grow beyond that. And quite frankly, I have a job, and I have a job that I love, and it's important to me. And I want to do that over there, and I want to do this over here. And that's what keeps me going at this, is that this isn't my job. I think if this was my job, I would feel that pressure to like, I got to do this kind of thing, and I have to allow for this type of fan to read this type. I don't want to think about that. It's so much better for me to be like, I'm going to write a rumor guide article about the turtle hermit being a Tenkaichi Budokai champion. And that's going to make my day. And that's all I want to do. That's all I want to do, man.
Love that.
Which Patreon tier do I have to be a member of to unlock the confirmation that Toriyama did indeed mean to end the series at the Frieza arc?
Man, we want to talk offline about some secret Patreon.
How many years of hosting do you want to cover?
Yeah, there's a certain tier that just reverses everything in the rumor guide, so that everything that's untrue.
I'm willing to entertain that. we get all the time. We get all these. It's just like these AI bot, like SEO backlink things, always sending us emails. And we got one the other day that was like, how much would it cost for a guest article for crypto with backlinks? I'm like, that would be $10 million, and there will be no backlinks, and it will be up for a single day. What do you think about that? And they just stop responding.
The rumor flip on April Fools would be a good one, though.
You guys do love your April Fools.
April 1st is always
we're
a good
committed
day
to April Fools now.
What's funny is our commitment to April Fools is no longer about doing jokes. It's about launching legitimate content. And I think that's fun.
So April 1st, 2025 is the wiki launch date. Got it.
I didn't say that.
Put that in the rumor guide.
Strongly implied, but no,
Sorry,
I think,
Heath,
and we've had this discussion many times. Mike and I on other podcasts, our own podcast, just the separation of work life,
separation of church and state in 2025. Yes. It's important.
Pretty much,
it really is.
That is really one thing that really keeps the drive going. I mean, because we do have times where one of us has to step away for an extended period of time or go do something.
You want Dragon Ball news to break? Let me go on a cruise for a week. You are guaranteed to get new stuff.
And so it's just nice knowing that you can step away, and it's not like, well, now my livelihood is completely impacted. And it would also just really even affect how we approached what we worked on and how we work on it. I don't know that I could sit down and do it every single day, all the time. Especially shooting a video is one thing, but writing, like committing yourself to writing an article and then including images and then maybe doing something else and a podcast and like that, it just seems exhausting to me. And I would become overwhelmed very quickly. And then
I can tell you,
dry.
I can tell you it's exhausting because I did it as an experiment recently with something that I still have yet to launch, but I swear it's coming soon. Within something like the Goku birthday rumor guide article, we talk about what these job descriptions for sites like comicbook.com look like, where you're expected to write 50 articles quota within this time span, and they're supposed to be perfectly SEOified, ready to go. So there was a week where I think I was off from work or something, or I had something else going on, and I committed myself. I'm going to write a complete bespoke article on a certain topic every single day. And I did it for, I think, 12 straight days. And at the end of each day, I like doing this as an experiment for fun. And I did it all off work hours. And I just wanted to see what I could do. And at the end of each of those days, I had a complete article, and it was fully, sourced. I did all the images myself, whether they were screen caps or manga scans or even game captures, that kind of stuff. It was exhausting. Like, yeah, it was incredible information, but then thinking about like, oh, well, they have to do 5 times the amount of this in a shorter time span. Like, that's why you get those kinds of articles on those sites. But I just thought it would be fun to try that for myself. Coming soon.
So, Heath, you had kind of alluded to like the refactor of the animation guide being something that you were really proud of. So this might be your answer, but for the two of you, just what has made you proudest throughout the history of your work on Kanzenshuu, on its predecessors, whether it's something on the site itself or something that spawned out of it or anything in between?
I'll take a stab at that first, because I think honestly, it's the whole thing and how everything works together. Because depending on the day, I have a different thing. Like, I am most proud of that because somebody got something from that thing that I did that doesn't exist anywhere else. When I started doing Kanzenshuu, we tried to structure everything around episodes and chapters and then spread out from there. And I think we've done a really good job of incorporating that into Kanzenshuu, but also having other things that are now incorporated into it that we had never really imagined doing before. I love how the animation production guide kind of merges with the episode guide where you can go back and forth, but then also it's linked to the chapters. And you can just take yourself through a web of things to get to the information that you're looking for, or a lot of stuff that you weren't even intending on finding. You just stumbled across it while looking for something else. I think one of the things outside of animation type stuff that I'm most proud of is really our translation archive. And then in turn, Mike's baby, his press archive. A lot of that stuff, it just does not exist anywhere. And we have just the best people that we trust that have studied for years and taken tests and accreditations to be able to not translate, weird Dragon Ball interviews, but that's what they do, and they do it with us. And it's really fun because we all kind of learn together on that, because there's some of that stuff that we knew existed or there was a hint on it on like Japanese Wikipedia. And then we go and we buy it and we find it, and then we get to read it for the first time. And then we get to share it with everybody else that gets to read it for the first time. Even if it's just about Toriyama's wedding and nobody really cares and doesn't impact the series at all. It's just really good information to have there that didn't exist before. And I think between that, the other thing that I really enjoy doing is working with Julian on the manga guide, because his insights on some of that stuff is the little minute things that are only
absolutely encyclopedic, only in his brain.
Yes. Like Japanese readers may pick up on it, but in English it makes, it flies over our head. And Julian will catch all of that and put it in there. And that just astounds me. He is so good at that.
And I think that would be my answer to is just Julian, just as an entity. I'm most proud of.
Yes.
We've often talked about the Battle of Gods era where he bought every single magazine. Like the reason we know that the original script was going to be Super Saiyan God was bulky with a cape fighting a lizard god of destruction. Julian's the only one who translated all that stuff because he was keeping up with it and bought every magazine and personally translated all that stuff. That's incredible. But I'm also very proud of a lot of like little stuff we have on the site. Things like every weekly comment that Toriyama made, we had on the site. All of the ratings for all of the episodes we had on the site before Shueisha put out the 30th anniversary Super History book. That's incredible. Some of that stuff existed, yes, on Japanese sites. Japanese superfan Peking Duck had a scrolling list of all of Toriyama's weekly comments in Japanese, but they weren't translated anywhere in English. The fact that we had and continue to have that stuff, I'm really proud of that. Like this is the kind of stuff that I think is the most interesting. Like, yeah, I'm willing to have that conversation about what does Super Saiyan 100 look like. That's fun. I'm not above saying that's a fun conversation, but also let's talk about the boils from the comments. Like that is also really, really fun to me. And I'm really proud of the work that he did. And then we were all able to collaborate on together.
Now, the last kind of question in this main category is we talked about the fact that the train's never going to stop. There's going to be Dragon Ball content forever. It's going to outlive all of us. But if at any point, for some reason, there wasn't, do you think you'd still be able to find things to work on Kanzenshuu? Or do you think one day you would just be done?
No, we're never going to be done. I'm looking, there's the Toriyama interview in the Daimao Fukatsu book that we haven't done yet. I've got this comic box magazine, I think, over here that we haven't translated yet. Like, we have all these magazines from the 80s and 90s that we just haven't gotten around to. Like, we were bummed when Super started because we thought we were going to be able to catch up on this kind of stuff. And then it just hasn't finished. So every time there's a new series or a new manga thing, we're like, oh man, what if we had a chance to go back? Like, we haven't finished the revamping the movie guide to have pages for, like, people want to know, like, who did all the animation in movie 12. Like, sorry, we haven't gotten around to doing that page yet because we're doing all this other stuff here.
The credits.
Yeah, we'll never be done. Oh, that's true. The credits are available.
There's so much stuff out there that even pages that we had idea. Like, I started going back through Dragon Ball episodes and inserting all the music and a bunch of extra notes, and we have notes galore that have not made it onto pages yet. So there are so many things that we could deep dive back into from 1985 that we haven't even touched yet, and here we are trying to document things that are currently happening, and sometimes we can't even keep up with that. So I have no fear that there will always be something to do. Even if it's not the current new hot thing, right. There's always something. Yeah.
I think it speaks to your guys' that it's a passion project, and even if there's no more Dragon Ball content, as long as you guys remain passionate about it, there will be something to do.
Yeah.
So we end every episode with recommendations of, just things we think people should buy or check out or anything like that. So I figured this episode we'd keep it Dragon Ball focused. I guess we kind of established there's not even a great thing to recommend to consume the series proper. So if you have a specific manga and or anime release that people could go to, I guess start with that. And then beyond that, anything else that you would recommend.
I have to recommend. I mentioned this towards the end of I did an Akira Toriyama retrospective panel at Otakon this year, and I threw this in there. This is a fact. People don't know that Viz released Akira Toriyama's manga theater. Like, the vast majority of his one-shots, most of them pre-Dragon Ball and many contemporary with Dragon Ball, those are officially available in English. There's an amazing hardcover book that you can buy. It's also available digitally from Viz as well. Translated by a friend of the site, Greg Werner, ran his own Ultimate DBZ info site back in the day. A longtime Toriyama fan, current One Piece super fan. You can just go buy manga theater now. please do so. You will learn so much more about this guy. You'll learn more about him reading manga theater than you will reading Dragon Ball, quite frankly. I think you owe it to yourself as a Dragon Ball fan to see where he came from and how he crafted stories. And of course, it contains the adventure of Tong Pu and the 2 chapters of Dragon Boy that were direct, not prequels, but like prototype draft works that he made on the way to creating Dragon Ball. It's so important. It's so wonderful that that's available in English now. So manga theater, check it out.
That hardcover is beautiful too.
Yeah.
Who else has recommendations?
I would recommend Sandland. Personally,
Sandland, yeah.
The animation is beautiful. And
Are you talking about the series?
Yes, the fact that it even got made, I think, is a testament to Toriyama. Yes, there you go, Mike. Show it off.
The movie Blu-ray, but
yeah. I think it's still on Netflix, correct?
On Hulu over here.
Yeah,
Hulu. Yes,
Hulu.
that's what it is.
And if you're outside of the U.S. specifically, probably Disney Plus.
Yeah,
you can read it on the Viz app as well.
If you want a really good dive into a quality Toriyama story.
Yeah, if you're enjoying the talk about
changes.
demons and demons versus angels, that kind of stuff, like there it was, 25 years ago.
Yeah, that was an interesting thing about getting into the Dragon Ball manga and manga in general through Viz's Shonen Jump, because their first year of publication, they had Sandland running in their magazine. So, like, I saw the Sandland manga as soon as I saw the Dragon Ball manga.
It wasn't that old at that point. It was only like 2-3 years old.
True, yeah, wow.
I want to play the Sandman video game just to see Toriyama's, like, mechanical tank designs fully realized in 3D. I love that.
I'm just going to play this game where everything you mentioned I just have like available within This is the Japanese strategy guide for the video game. They incorporated like all this like little Easter eggs of Toriyama mech designs from like Dragon Ball works and the other associated things. They're all in there. It's incredible. I bought that game on release and just haven't had a chance to play it, but man. And also we learned like maybe it started, the whole Sandland project started as a video game and then turned into other things. Just wild to learn how this all kind of shook out.
Yeah.
Nice. I know, I mentioned that one of my first big dives into Dragon Ball was through the video games. So I'd say to anyone enjoying Sparking Zero, like definitely go back, try the Budokai Tenkaichi games, Budokai. But for those who aren't really interested in the fighters, if you're more of a JRPG kind of person, like the pixel RPGs, Legacy of Goku 2 and Boo's Fury on the Game Boy might be worth a play if you're into those kind of games. A little more low-key.
Legacy of Goku 2, notably the only game reverse imported from the Infogrames Atari era. Bon Presto, I think, brought it back over in Japan. And they undubified all the dialogue. They brought it back over. They didn't translate the dub script. They put the own actual original dialogue back in the game.
Nice.
Very funny.
Wow. I think it retained some of the Faulkner soundtrack too.
It did, yeah. That's the weird thing about that. The reverse import is like that's your only example of like a Japanese version with the Faulkner production score in it. Very strange.
That's cool.
Cain, do you have any recommendations?
I mean, I think the easiest thing to always recommend is, even if you're just curious or cautiously curious about Dragon Ball, knowing kind of what you've heard about the original with, some of the little stumbling blocks for modern sensibilities and things, you just get the Shonen Jump app for like $2 and read the first 3 chapters, and then worst case, you're out $2.
Yeah.
Like and then you can say you gave it a shot, you gave it your best, and that's it. And if you like it, well, it's all there. The full color like versions, I believe, are there for at least Saiyan and Namek Frieza Saga arcs and stuff. So it's really like such a low stakes gamble to make if you've only ever been involved in like Dragon Ball Z and Super and stuff like that. Because worst case, you're out the price of a small cup of coffee at Sheetz or something, or whatever your local gas station chain is.
In
My
fact,
coffee was $2.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
In fact, Cain, you are out $0 because the first 3 chapters specifically of every manga on Viz Shonen Jump platform are free.
Yeah.
Well, there you have it.
That's how
Manga
So-
Theater. Oh,
Huh?
I was going to say Manga Theater and Sandland are also on the app.
Yeah, Manga Theater, Sandland, Jocko, except the actual, not even the actual last chapter. I've tried reporting this multiple times. They don't seem to understand that the second to last chapter is not the bonus chapter. All of Dr. Slump, Manga Theater, Sandland's on there, Koa's on there, I think, as well. Like, you have a wealth of Toriyama to read. So yeah, you want to pay those $3.
Yep. And for physical collecting, can you still get the Viz Bigs? Are those the best ones?
The most recent release are the 3-in-1s,
Right.
which uses
Were
the
they actually
Kanzenshuu
called
cover artwork. But yeah, it's Dragon Ball beginning to end. It's really cheap paper though. But
Yeah,
I feel like
know.
I still see Viz Bigs on bookshelves occasionally.
Okay.
Usually you're going to see like the old graphic novel versions with a couple of Viz Bigs with a couple 3-in-1s. Like you kind of get what you get there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always see like volume 3 and 5 of the bigs are just like a random one of them on a shelf, and I'll be like, oh, maybe someday I'll see them all.
Right. Wow.
And then every once in a while, you see like one of the larger pre-Shonen Jump graphic novel size ones that they did back in like 2000, before the launch of the Shonen Jump print magazine.
Oh, like the floppies, like the American floppies.
Not even the floppies, no, but between the floppies and then when they started doing the smaller ones, the red size where everything was tankobon size,
Oh,
they were like
slightly
slightly
bigger.
larger graphic novel ones. Like you'll still see one of those on the shelf. You're like, what the hell is
Oh.
this one?
That'd be wild. Yeah, and I guess for anime, pay $1,000 for the Dragon boxes. I don't know. At least it's for 3 now. I don't know.
For the most part, just stream it. I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
in my wildest dreams, I never could imagine that you could press like 3 buttons and just watch the series beginning to end. Like,
True.
all right, yeah, some of it. If you do watch in Japanese Z proper, for the most part, it is Dragon Box Masters, and then there's still a bunch of
Okay.
problems. Like I think in the Boo arc, like they stretch some episodes and squish some other episodes, even though it's supposed to be 4. But it's a disaster. It's Z, so it's a disaster. It just kind of is what it is.
Of course,
But
it's cursed. It's like Star Wars. Okay, awesome. I've taken you guys to almost the 3-hour mark. So sorry. We will round off, let everyone know where they can find us. You can find us, Fandom Post Radio, anywhere you find podcasts. Please subscribe, rate, and review. We're on Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, Spotify, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, Alexa, Amazon Music, fandompost.com, all associated podcatchers. You'll find us. You can find us on social media, whatever is left of Twitter, and I don't know, whatever is left of Facebook. At Fandom Post Radio, or you can just email us at fandompostradio@gmail.com. I am technically also on Twitter at FullMetalKyoma, but I don't really post anything. So, yeah. Brandon, where can they find you?
You can find me at Hellshake Brando on all socials. And as I learned at the beginning of the episode, I just stepped out of the room of spirit and time where I just came from. So nothing in the pipeline right now, but this episode was a reason for me to come back.
We're making those live edits. We're making those reverse dub importation.
Yeah.
Cain, I assume you are still exclusive to us.
Yep, that's right.
Excellent. All right, Mike, Keith, where can people find you and your work, and what recent or upcoming work should they be looking out for?
www.kanzenshuu.com. That is Kanzenshuu. That is the central resource for everything. That's the main site. You want to join the forum from there? Do it from there. You want to listen to the podcast? Do it from there. All the socials are linked off there. We are Kanzenshuu on all the things that matter and some that don't anymore. Find me around as Vegetto EX. That is Vegetto spelled correctly, Vegetto EX. I am that on all the things as well. Heath, who are you?
Well, you can find me wherever you find Mike, usually. Except I am Hujio. Hujio. Other than that, yeah, everything you can find straight off of our website. That'll lead you where you need to go.
stay tuned for that wiki stuff. It's certainly coming.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned this earlier, but the latest podcast episode, I had a great time with a friend of mine, JP Burke, who works at NASA. We had a great conversation just sitting here in my basement, drinking drinks, looking around the room. It's like, tell me about space, man. Just tell me everything you know. And it was great. It was honestly one of my favorite podcast episodes in a while. So I think that's a good introduction to the kind of things that we do on Kanzenshuu.
Yes, that was very fun. Yeah. As a last note, I will just mention that when Cain and I started this podcast from Chris's site, it's been 7-8 years now.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Time being a flat circle and all.
Yeah, right. My big motivations were like Kanzenshuu, Cast, One Piece podcast. Those were the podcasts I listened to every time an episode dropped. They were what made me think like I want to be in this kind of environment where I talk to cool people about the things I'm passionate about. So I'm glad I could bring it full circle almost 20 years after Mike started his podcast and have you guys on this show.
That's great. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I just realized that, we're coming up on 19, I think. No, it's going to be 20. No, 19. 20. No. First episode was 2005. So, whatever the math works out to there.
Right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for joining this episode. And thanks everyone for listening. And we will see you next time.
Appreciate you guys.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Any opportunity to talk about what we do and what we love. It's great.
We do like to talk about ourselves. If you couldn't tell.
At least 3 hours worth.
We could go longer, but yeah.